welcome back if you were viewing our special council meeting before. We are now in our Finance and Budget Committee meeting, starting at 5:56 p.m. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. This is to call to order. May I have all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And I will turn it over to Councillor Martin for our territorial land acknowledgement.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. We do have a few additions to this evening's meeting. Item 1.9, which is a delegate who will speak later. Item 10.1, which is the operating budget, unfunded budget options for consideration. There's an addition of memorandum, re-expanded explanations of unfunded budget options. And then item 10.3, the cost reduction options for 2024 draft operational budget. And this is in addition to the memorandum amendments to report COR 2024-07 cost reduction options. The recommendation is that the agenda as presented be adopted. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we do have minutes from January 25th, 2024 and January 27th, 2024 Finance and Budget Committee meetings. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Do you have a comment, Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes, through the chair. I was reading through the minutes and they are quite lengthy. There's a long list of motions and deferrals and other items. I would actually amend the motion and move that we postpone the approval of these minutes until the final budget meeting, or potentially have it tacked on to a council meeting when the budget is set for approval. Realistically, I'd just like more time to read through and sort of go back and track some of the things that we were making note of, because it's just a lot to get through.
I will look to our clerk for advice on what that means.
Through you, Mayor, council can certainly defer the minutes, or refer them rather to, I'm trying to think of when the budget is going to go forward. March 4th is the suggested date at this point, so we could refer them to March 4th, council. That works.
Okay, so this is a motion to refer, then moved by Councillor Wilkinson, to refer these minutes to the March 4th meeting. I would need a seconder for that, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, that carries unanimously. We have no presentations this evening, but we do have one delegation that has registered. You will be given 7 minutes to speak, and I do just have some general rules to go over, but as a general reminder, if delegates conduct themselves in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate muting or removal from the meeting, which includes interrupting councillor, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillor, staff, or others, hate speech, or defamatory comments. I will now invite Lori Larici to please come up. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming in person. It's nice to have people here.
Thank you. Is this the, okay. Who times me, or do I time me?
Our deputy clerk will put one up on the screen for you to see.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Countdown. Okay, ready? Mayor and Council, my name is Lori Larish, and I have been a resident of Wilmot Township for about 16 years. A friend of mine always says to me, the biggest expense in life is taxes. And boy, I couldn't agree more. Why the property tax of 10.6? And why am I not in favor of this? I'm going to list some reasons why I'm not in favor of this. And one of them is, how is that going to affect our residents who are on fixed incomes? Have we looked at that? Waterloo Regional Food Bank, if you look at their website, 1 in 10 households in Waterloo Region struggle to afford to put food on the table, and those numbers were 1 in 14, so that number has increased. Another reason I'm against this tax increase is the most recent mortgage increases, higher property tax, higher interest rates, makes owning a home in Wilmot Township less affordable. Other reasons why I'm not in favor of a tax increase of 10.6. Business insolvencies are increasing. And again, with a property tax increase, that will not help local businesses that are already struggling. An increase of 10.6 will also have a ripple effect to the end consumer. So if you increase the cost of business, you increase the cost of products and services to the end user. Canadians are already struggling to pay the bills. God grief. Anyways, struggling to pay the bills, mortgages, food, medical bills. Oh, good grief. And multiple tax increases, such as carbon tax. Getting more money from the taxpayers is not always the answer. Let's think of some possible solutions. Learn to think outside of the box. Stop thinking we can't do this without more money. How can we do this with the same money or less? Maybe a hot topic is Castle Kilbride. I've heard it's losing $200,000 a year. Maybe make that half. Offer discounts to residents who get their tax bill online. I'm sure there's a cost associated with mailing that out. Offer that to the residents. Biggest expense in business and organizations is employees. You need them, but how many do you need? Possibly offer early retirement. Attrition programs, that as people leave, they're not replaced. Incentives for departments who cut costs and who are under budget. Recently, I talked to a resident of New Hamburg, and he said he looked at the sunshine list and he was appalled at how many employees in Wilmot Township are on the sunshine list. So I took the opportunity last night to have a look at it. Boy, was I surprised. So I decided to look at Wilmot versus Woolwich because we're both in the same municipality. We both have relatively the same populations, and I just want to have a quick look at some numbers. I'm just looking at numbers. Wilmot is 22,000 population, Woolwich is 28. Wilmot has 86 full-time employees, Woolwich has 82. If you look out and divide it, how much that is, Woolwich has 255.81 people per staff member, and divide out Woolwich at 28,000 by 82 is $341.46 people per staff member. If you work out the numbers, and my husband helped me with this, so please don't ask me the numbers because I'm not a very good numbers person. Wilmot has more staff. Wilmot has more staff and less population. If you look at it and do the numbers, Wilmot should have a staff of about 64.43 instead of 86, which means we have about 25% more staff if you do the ratio between staff and population. Now, another thing I found extremely interesting in the Sunshine, which is the Ontario Sunshine, you can go on the website, find it. Woolwich raises in 2021 were 6%, 2019 5.2. These are the highest average raise increases. Average is 2.8. Wilmot in 2021 is 12.1% increase, in 2020 9.9. The average increase for raises, and this goes from numbers are 2004, 2007, so they're right up to the current 2022, is 4.2, not quite double. So Also, something I found amazing, when you look at the sunshine list, you look at people's positions, the date, and how much they're paid. In Woolwich, for a similar position, in 2022, the salary was $163,626. In Wilmot, in 2022, the salary for the same position, which I believe it is because it's listed the same, is $230,943, which means there's a difference of $67,317. That is a big difference. What is that person doing that's so much better than the person in Woolwich? So I find these numbers amazing. It's all there for public opinion. Somebody told me once, socialism is great until you run out of other people's money. That's it.
Thank you very much for coming in, Lori. We appreciate your delegation. Councillors, are there any questions for Lori at this time? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, no questions. I just want to say to Lori, I know we've chatted at length before, and I really appreciate you coming out to share your concerns about the budget. And I know you're not alone in this. There's a lot of residents that feel the same way.
Okay.
Councillor Cressman?
Yeah. Yes, I'm wondering if you looked at reserves per capita?
No, I didn't. I did not look at that.
Excuse me. That's
Sorry.
where we diverge significantly, because the past councils have robbed reserves at the expense of keeping taxes down. And so I think this is the challenge that we faced as a council is, so I think you have to look at that to look in balance with where we're sitting on this. It's not, I'm a taxpayer as well. Granted, my farm properties, a portion is exempt because it is farm property, but it is, yes, it's a significant increase. I wish it wasn't so, but maybe I got the benefit of lower taxes in previous years when that was the case. So take a look at them as well, because that's a conundrum we face as a council.
Councillor Cressman, what is the numbers for Woolwich? I know that Wilmot is, what, 280?
We're sitting at $50 reserves per capita, and I'm trying to look at where. Pardon? Yes. North Dumfries is really ringing the bells. They have some very nice reserves, but that makes a considerable difference. So thank you.
Okay.
I agree with all what you say, but it's, yeah.
I'm new at this, and I don't have all the numbers, and I would really prefer not to do this, but I was saying to Chris that I heard that a democracy is when the people hold people that they vote accountable, and I didn't realize that till recently.
It's just an aside. I think I read somewhere in a newsletter that the question is, or that people shouldn't stop asking questions, that they should continue to ask questions. It's when they stop asking questions that real problems develop.
I was just curious, Lori, did you listen at all to the council meeting when our CFO, Mr. Elliott, broke down the tax proportions? So although it's 10.6% for Wilmot, we're still about 26 cents on the dollar of your tax dollars goes to Wilmot. So it's only that portion increase. Not to say that that's not a large increase, but I'm just curious. I know for me, certainly seeing those numbers were quite interesting, and about 56 cents of the dollar actually goes to the region of Waterloo in your taxes. Right. So although their percentages increase was less, the amount of money that you're contributing when you pay your tax bill is far more significant going to the region. Again, that's still an area that we absolutely need to cut as well, but... True. Yes, but I just wanted to make that aware, because that's something not everyone knows.
What I'm learning, I'm supposed to say, Mayor, Solomon, right? What I'm learning is there's so many rules and regulations and so many levels of government that it just makes it absolutely mind-boggling. And I think that's why most people just don't get involved, because it's just too much. So, thank
Well,
you.
we very much appreciate you
You're
coming out
welcome.
today. Thank you. And any other questions or comments, councillors? All right. Thank you. Lori, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but we also understand if you need to head on. We have no other delegations or correspondence for this evening, so we will jump right into reports 10.1. And I will turn it over to our Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. I'll be the interim treasurer.
I'm sorry, I'm not certain what I said, but
I
what
heard
did I
Mr.
say?
Elliott, and then I heard CAO, so
Okay, I'm very sorry. Don't mind me, our interim Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer. I'm not even certain how I did that because I was reading my notes, but Mr. Elliott, thank you.
the first item on the agenda, 10.1, has to do with the unfunded budget options. Council or committee may choose to push this further back in the agenda. I know that you've done that a couple of times and said, let's save that for the end. So that might be the first question before I speak much more.
Does anybody want to push it to later or deal with it now? Councillor Crescent?
We have to start somewhere. So is the one that you handed out the same as the one that was on the revised agenda? Because I marked my revised agenda one, I printed it out, and
I believe they're the same.
My understanding is that this is the unfunded budget options, and there's the additional information that we've got. It's a memo,
Yes.
3 or 4 pages. What was handed to you, I believe, is the same as the revised. It is for me.
Yes, okay, just wanted to make sure.
Through you, Madam Chair, this report is just providing some additional information behind those unfunded budget options. My sense was the presentation in the past, in the budget document itself, each of these had one sentence, maybe two. And so we wanted to give you an opportunity to have it in print as to what those actually mean and what we're intending with these budget options, a little expanded explanation. We're all here. Any of us would be happy to speak to any questions that you may have about any of the items. And I think that's my opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I noticed that the other townships have put through their budgets, and the sustainability coordinator, that was a shared cost with the other, some of the other townships. Has that been included, do you know, in their approved budgets?
I can speak to that through the mayor. Woolwich has approved a new sustainability coordinator position, and as directed by council, I have approached the 4 townships to see if there was interest in sharing. We've just started some initial discussions. I think there is interest among the group to pursue it. I'm not really certain whether we can finalize that before our budget is approved. But I don't know how many would be interested in ultimately sharing. So I do have in here that if council felt that they wanted to share, we would require maybe up to $50,000 to $60,000 to be put in the budget this year as a placeholder, because at a minimum there would be 2 municipalities sharing a position, but there could be a reduction in cost if more decide to share, and also if we're able to achieve some grant funding.
Sorry, does that mean that Woolwich is paying 100% for theirs and they wouldn't be involved in this?
That has been approved by their council, but they said they would engage in discussions with us about potentially sharing that position, but I think they want to ensure that they're going to be getting what they need out of the position primarily.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair, to CAO Chambers, is this a position that conceivably you can live without but rather just simply sort of change the culture and the thinking, and that every director or every department sort of take ownership from a perspective of sustainability and say, are there other options or avenues that should be explored with regards to the tasks that would be set out by this individual, potentially?
Through you, Mayor, I think initially what the CAOs were envisioning this role to do is to actually sort of develop the work plan and develop priorities in which we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions to meet those targets. It does have to be part of the corporate culture then. Once that work plan is in place, it has to be owned by all of the department heads and incorporated into the work that they do, and through their procurement processes annually that they're looking at those greenhouse gas reductions. So in addition to this position, once a work plan is developed, there would be additional costs on an ongoing basis as well as we incorporate those sustainability initiatives within our annual procurement and work plans. And so ultimately there is a lot of cost. So I think in the absence of this position, quite frankly, it'll be a corner of the desk activity for directors, and I don't think we'll see the plan being meaningfully advanced.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to CAO Chambers, I guess just helping myself, to quote my colleague, Councillor Martin, who will say, like, thinking out loud and maybe a comment more than a question sometimes, but I'm just thinking, we tend to see the economic pressures around us are starting to shift things more towards being green or having less impact on the environment. So I'm wondering if naturally we will see this shift just occur through what's available to us for purchase and procurement. And quite frankly, I would probably, before agreeing, personally, this is my opinion, before agreeing to a position like this with this kind of a price tag on it, I would be curious to see how we're performing now versus what was sort of set out in the original intention behind our greenhouse gas reduction strategy, and wondering really if that could be something that could be achieved through a strategic plan and potentially continue to be a corner of the desk item. I don't know how much we would actually see benefit out of this at this time. While I do think it is important, I think we're going to continue to see just market conditions change in favor of this happening naturally.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. To piggyback off of Councillor Wilkinson, I would suggest that, although this is a very important position, that it be held off till 2025. With the increase that we're looking at, I would suggest that we move it to 2025 to consider.
Yes.
I did just want to make a comment too that Woolwich has actually been, they've implemented for a couple of years now a greening levy, and so they do have a pool of funds to draw upon, and I think that's how they're funding their position. So it's not necessarily having an impact on the tax base, and the same with Wellesley. So they've been putting away 1%.
But we have not.
And we have not.
Okay.
Correct.
So it would still, the money would still cost us, even if they helped, $50,000, which is half a point, right?
Correct.
Right. So I would suggest that it be moved to 2025.
So that's moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Any comments or questions at this time, councillors? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I guess I'm of the similar opinion, through you, Mayor, of the similar opinion, and I always like to learn from others, and we can be looking over the shoulder of Wellesley and Woolwich and understand what their initiatives are and how it looks, and I think that can inform us for 2025.
The only thing that I'm curious about, CAO Chambers, is if you continue with negotiations, are we potentially putting ourselves in a spot of not having reserves to contribute, that we would be excluded from what the groups are doing? I'm just wondering, if we have nothing put aside towards this, do we have potential funds somewhere else to possibly draw from?
Through you, Mayor, no.
Didn't think so, but wanted to ask. Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I guess I'm thinking two things. One is the possibility of doing the 50 to 60,000 as a partial funding. I'm also wondering about the greening levy that you're talking about, CAO Chambers. If you know any more about it, or if somebody else knows something about it, what would it take to implement? If Wellesley and Woolwich have been doing a greening levy, what would that look like if we would consider that?
Through you, Mayor, it's my understanding that their councils have committed to putting money away annually, similarly to what we would do with our infrastructure reserve, is that they've dedicated a percentage every year towards building a reserve related to sustainability.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, so thank you for that information. I guess I wonder what it would, I don't know if it takes then a motion from my part to put it forward, but that seems to be a good idea. I mean, we're gonna have to move in that direction, whether we're talking 20 by 30 or 20 by 50, whether we're talking about the other governments in terms of directives that will be given, whether we're going to be forced or whether we willingly do it. I think it's something we're gonna have to be doing.
So we will need to dispense with the current matter on the floor before that gets brought up, but after we vote on that, we can bring up that motion if you would like, Councillor Martin. Is that what you're asking for? I just want clarity.
I wasn't sure because I was also thinking then, I guess, which would be an amended motion of the 50 to 60,000 as opposed to wiping this out entirely, but looking at a partial funding. So I was wondering if one or the other might be something to consider.
Just let me converse with the clerk for a moment. I just want to make sure procedurally that I'm not messing this up. So after chatting to the clerk, we're gonna still deal with what's on the floor because what you're talking about is separate from what the actual sustainability coordinator role is. Unless I'm misunderstanding, you're wanting to have a green levy. If you're wanting to tie that directly into a sustainability coordinator, my understanding is how other municipalities have done it is that the money has been put into a reserve specifically for greening initiatives, so it could be a coordinator, but it could be other initiatives as well. So I would just need clarity from you as to if you're talking about you would want to put forward a motion for a green levy that would deal with that amount. So if it's to raise $50,000 this year, then it could be used towards a sustainability coordinator, but it wouldn't have to be.
Well, I guess through you, Mayor Salonen, I'm curious if anybody else is willing to speak at this time about that as a possibility. I realize procedurally we need to deal with this. We've got a motion. Then maybe it has to be an amended motion to this motion if we were considering partially paying. I'm just putting it out there that if we do nothing, it puts us in a bad spot from my point of view.
So I understand that. I was just asking procedurally. We do need to dispense with what's currently on the floor, but it won't change your ability to be able to bring up that motion after. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, point of order. So at present, we are discussing, if I believe I'm correct, the option one on this memo. However, the motion on the floor that's being discussed right now is deferral of this. So we need to talk about that before, correct? Or would Councillor Martin potentially be able to add an amendment on it? I guess it would have to be defer this chunk of money, but fund it through, I think I understand what he's saying is fund it through a greening levy that would be separate. Could you add an emotion or an amendment on this?
So it wouldn't necessarily be an amendment. Right now we have to refer the sustainability coordinator to 2025. What Councillor Martin is talking about, that money, if it were passed, could be used for a sustainability coordinator, but a green levy on a whole is separate because that would impact our budget separately from this being a continual role. So we're going to dispense with right now, the deferral to 2025 for the sustainability coordinator, and then Councillor Martin will have an opportunity to bring his motion to the floor. Councillor Sadhu?
Yeah, just to kind of summarize in my mind, I'm going to speak out loud here. I am in favor of deferring it to 2025. As far as the green levy, it's more or less of, either way, it's going to be coming from the tax base. You put some money aside now.
We're going to talk about the green levy
Right.
after. We're
But,
just talking about deferral.
Yeah, so for me, I would be in favor of deferring it to 2025, just with their budget pressures as we see right now and the tax increases we see. That is something I would be moving forward with.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the deferral of the sustainability coordinator? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote on that. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. Councillor Martin, do you have a motion you'd like to bring forward on the green levy?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. Yes, I would put forward a motion to implement a greening levy, although I haven't thought through an amount. I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with what percentages the other townships had in place.
I think CAO Chambers has some insight.
I know that Wellesley is 1%. If you would like more information, you could pass a motion to direct staff to report back prior to passing of the budget. Because
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. Thank you, CAO Chambers. I think that's a good idea. I would like to put forward a motion then that we ask staff for information on a greening levy so that prior to passing the budget, we consider a greening levy.
Okay, very good. That's moved by Councillor Martin. Is there a seconder for this information? Seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Any comments or questions? It is just a request for information at this time. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I certainly appreciate where my colleague's coming from, and I do think it's an important conversation. My concern about looking at something like a greening levy at this time is it's essentially a tax in addition to the 10.6. I certainly agree that we need to really take into consideration here climate change and the effects on our township and the pressures it puts on us. My concern would be it would directly potentially impact, obviously, the levy that would be passing on, and I do have serious concerns about that. With that said, I would go back to my former statement and really think out that we are naturally seeing the market shift to being greener, and I think it's evident with the vehicles we're purchasing. We're purchasing electric vehicles versus combustion engine vehicles. So I think we'll naturally see this trend through procurement and what's available to us. I don't necessarily know how effective this would be, and quite frankly, I think it potentially just adds to the cost of living. That's my personal thought on it. So I would not be in support of it. I certainly would be interested in the information, but that's just my general thoughts.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I as well have some concerns, but I am interested in the information. I don't think it's something we can do this year, but I would like to have the information so that once we actually get our reserves, which are terrible, we can start building those up, then perhaps we can start taking some, but we need to concentrate on that. So, thank you.
Any other, Councillor Stu?
Yeah, so my line of thinking, I don't disagree that it is something that we should be considering, but having a levy to put money aside for something down the road, it's not found magic money, it's still coming from the same tax base. So, I don't know, for me personally, to have staff report back on something that I don't know, it's not going to really offer any more advantages for us right now. It's essentially stocking away money, but we need to focus on a couple other pressures beforehand. So I don't know if it's the best use of staff time to gather that information and bring it back to us. So I won't be in favor of it, but not saying I wouldn't be in favor of a coordinator or some other positions in the future. It's just, to me, it's not making sense to stock away money now to pay for something later. It's still all coming from the same tax base.
Any other questions or comments on this, councillors? All right, so all those in favor in receiving information on a greening levy, what that would look. Councillor Martin, yes? Oh, sorry. Okay, I hadn't gotten there yet. I just thought that you were saying I wasn't summarizing your point correctly. Okay, so all those in favor? And all those opposed? And that does not carry. So I guess then the next logical step forward would be looking at option item number 2, which is community mailing and advertising, and perhaps we dispense with all of the budget options one by one, unless somebody has a further comment. Okay. So option number 2, which is the community mailing and advertising budget option, which would be $15,000 to the budget to include neighborhood mail through Canada Post as an option to reach households, businesses, and farms across Wilmot. Request to research this option did come from council, and mail delivery directly to post codes is one communication tool that can be used for targeted communication campaigns, as well as this could be used towards online and digital options for costing for advertising as well. Questions? Councillor Dunstall?
I was just going to make a comment that I know that Councillor Wilkinson had proposed the quarterly report, and when I saw this, I just thought this would be an excellent way of getting that out. That's all I wanted to say.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, appreciate Councillor Dunstall bringing that up. I think, I believe it was myself who actually brought this idea forward, and ultimately, what I think the intent was and what I'm getting at is we see often our members of parliament and members of provincial parliament will send correspondence to households. Now, there's an argument to be made, I think, multiple ways. Is one, this is a way to reach everybody who doesn't necessarily utilize the web and online resources. And this could be a way to communicate ideas and happenings within the Township of Wilmot effectively to them. It could even go so far as to provide education. I mean, I would suggest that adding an additional layer to tax bills when they are sent out that would indicate what percentage breakdown goes to the region, what percentage goes to the township, I think would be an effective education piece. It definitely is a small amount in my opinion. It's still an expense nonetheless, but I do feel that just having that available to us in the case that we want to send communication out to the township as a whole, you know, there's still a case to be made for snail mail. So that's my argument for. I would move a motion that it be included as part of the communications budget. That would be my piece.
Would you be open to, I do agree it is an important means of communication and one that's often overlooked, but also looking at other jurisdictions and municipalities on how they deal with council communications and funding. It often comes through a discretionary budget fund, which I know is option number 4. I would be curious on, instead of, granted I'm assuming that there will be some form of discretionary budget passed, but my assumption would be why not put it into that budget instead, so that it doesn't, if we don't wind up spending $15,000 on mailing and advertising, it could potentially be used for a community town hall event or something. Just not having as much of a prescriptive, I guess, means around how it's spent, but still obviously using it for council's advantage to communicate with the community. That would just be my question, if you would be open to, and I guess all of council would be open to looking at that as part of the discretionary budget funds that council is considering. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, in that case, I will retract my motion, and I agree. We can discuss it as part of the discretionary piece. With that said, I would move then that a budget line item in particular for community mailings and adverts be deferred or just simply, I guess, not acted upon. I don't know what we would motion to say that, because we're not really doing anything with it.
I'll look to the clerk.
Through you, Mayor, there's really nothing to do in this case because there's no recommendation on the floor. So there's no proposal for it to move forward in the budget. So if you just leave it at that and we'll make note in the minutes that council chose not to move forward with this. That's how we'll handle that.
And through the chair, I think we should move on to item number 3, unless there's anybody else that wants to chime in.
Okay, seeing none. Option number 3, which is media training. And so this media training is proposed as a budget option to build in interview skills for members of council and the corporate leadership team. The media is an important partner in reaching the Wilmot community with information and updates. Spokespeople can connect with the community, instilling confidence and assurance at a time of crisis and deliver clear and timely communications in all circumstances. Good media relationships help increase public understanding of the roles and responsibilities of the municipal government and convey how the community can engage with the township. I'm actually going to start off the round of questions on this. I do appreciate and see the value in media training. I'm curious what the costing line actually is on that, and again, would it make more sense in the discretionary budget in terms of not everybody in council brings different skill sets, same as our CLT. I wouldn't necessarily want to see a standardize everybody has to do it if some people are more trained than others. So just curious, I guess I will refer that to you, Ms. Kell.
Thank you, Mayor Solonen, through you, Chair, to Council. The $15,000 gives us a ballpark figure. The hope would be that we would go out probably for 3 quotes or 3, probably through the request for proposal process so that we get the sort of qualitative piece that we want in terms of who can best serve Wilmot and train in that way. Training as a group does give us a benefit financially, and we would look at someone who would train individually within the group and give each person that attention that they need. So there would be opportunity for those with more comfort to go ahead and have a different experience. So the $15,000 is a ballpark figure, and we would be looking for the best value we could get for the best training experience at the same time.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
CEO Chambers, did you want to comment about my question on the discretionary part and lumping it in so it can be, again, more used as an as-needs basis?
Yeah, I think if council is looking at some of these individual items and you want to consider how they would best serve council, it might be best to look at them through those discretionary funds for council.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I was under the impression that we had some kind of agreement with Red Brick. No?
Through you, Chair, no, we don't. We're no longer contracting with Red Brick.
Councillor Sadhu.
Yeah, no, when I looked at this now, I immediately thought if we were going to proceed forward, we should lump it in with the discretionary budget and use it as an ad-needs basis and not just have a strict line item for that. So I would raise the motion that we include media training in our discretionary budget.
So I think we could just treat it like the last item. We wouldn't actually need a motion, but if nobody has objections to that, then we can move into the discretionary budget that we keep on referencing. So this is option number 4, which is the discretionary budget funds for CAO and council. The proposal is to add discretionary funds in either or both council and CAO budget areas to provide for flexibility in addressing issues or special needs which may arise during the year. Any such expenditures from the council's discretionary budget would require a motion by council, while the CAO would have the delegated authority and discretion to use any such funds in the CAO's budget for projects, initiatives, or events that may arise. This additional budget flexibility reduces the risk of overspending on contingencies and allows wider discretion in how these funds may be allocated. Right now, the suggestion is $50,000 discretionary funding proposed for each budget area. Who would like to start the discussion on this one? Councillor Cressman.
I'm of the opinion that's a little on the rich side, so I'd like to shave that down. Since we've lumped some of these other things in it, it doesn't give us a lot to work with, but originally I penciled 15,000, 10 or 15,000 for council and 20,000 for the CAO. So that's where I had penciled when I read it this afternoon before we started lumping some of these other things in it.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you. I too had looked at those numbers and thought perhaps we could shave them down to, I was a little bit, I thought 20 each, bring a total of 40 rather than 100. I thought that that might be able to meet our needs.
We'll go to Councillor Martin and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Through you, Chair Salonen, I'm curious, CAO Chambers, if you would be willing to comment on your side of things, if you had a certain number in mind of what would be useful for you.
Yeah, and I think it is a bit challenging because it is meant to deal with unforeseen things, so they're kind of unforeseen at this point. And I think the challenge that we have here in Wilmot is that we really don't have any discretionary reserves that we can use to deal with mid-year emergencies or things like that. And that is what's driving this need for these discretionary funds. Certainly in a tough budget year, we could look at paring this number down, and I understand that, and we're kind of lumping some of those additional things into the reserve. But, you know, just sitting here thinking about Mayor Salonen leading the Black History Month event and being able to pay a speaker, like there are those types of things that we want to do more of, and we would like to be able to have some funds to do those during the year. So, you know, I would leave it to council's discretion. I would be open to paring that down, understanding that it is a very tight budget year, but, you know, we really don't know what's ahead in the coming year.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I know we talked about the last two sort of items listed here and potentially looking at adding them as these are things that could be purchased through these discretionary funds. But my concern is still looking at it, it's 0.9%. And even if you trim it down, say we even look at half, it's still 0.45%. All of a sudden you tack that number on to the 10.6 and we're at 11. Now I know some of those numbers should have probably changed a smidge, maybe not. Getting a no. So effectively this is still adding to the operating budget, which I really have a hard time with it. And unfortunately, I don't necessarily know that we have the offsets in front of us either. So I'm of the opinion we pass on this and do nothing.
Councillor Martin?
Through you, Chair Salonen, I guess I'm curious whether it's other members of council or staff have responses. My question is thinking ahead where one of the agenda items coming up is the Prime Minister's path. If we need to engage some expert on helping us, I know that in the past there was the First Peoples Group. I understand we still have recommendations from that maybe that we haven't really acted on, that we could act on those recommendations. I'm also recognizing that dealing with the media can be complicated, and so I'm just thinking, I think that we do need to have some money here in order to help us over this current year.
Councillor Stu?
Sorry. Yeah, I look at this as it's not necessary that we have, if there's 50,000 that we have to spend 50,000. I look at it as more or less like a credit card. That's the limit. It's up to us to be responsible, and it might not necessarily be a 0.5% increase. It's just discretionary. It literally says it in the title. It's up to us to be responsible with the money, and I wouldn't get bogged down so much as to see a $50,000 number or a $100,000 number. It's more or less, it just gives us that wiggle room that if there's unforeseen things that pop up, then we can kind of pivot around and stick handle around it.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I agree with you, Councillor Sadhu, but it would still, the people still have to pay for it up front, whether we use it or not. It's still going to hit the tax base. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. We could only spend 10,000 and have all that left over, but at the end of the day, we're taking that money up front and then deciding if we're going to spend it. So.
I'm curious, Councillor Cressman, so if I'm doing my maths right, you had suggested 35,000 Did you want to put that forward as a motion? I know, certainly on my end, in some of the things that even the community has been asking or expecting of us, and not having funds to do them, having some wiggle room, and also from an economic development perspective, like, for example, discretionary would have been nice to have those bags that were made up for the Mike Scout wetlands. And that money, I don't even really know how Director Okrafka found that money, to be honest. But a lot of it is making money appear out of thin air, and I think that that's really essentially coming from our reserves that are funneling into operational. So recognizing we're trying to break a pattern that has been happening, I think that we need to give staff those resources and support so that they don't need to look at other ways for us to be finding money that doesn't exist in our budget. So I don't know, Councillor Cressman, if you wanted to move your $35,000 suggestion?
I would make a motion of 25,000 total.
25 total?
Yeah.
Equally split, or what was the split that you wanted?
I'm not so sure we need a split, and that we can use it as a discretionary to work with.
The CAOs.
Media training I've received over the years has been stay on message, stay on message, stay on message, stay on message.
So media training done. CAO Chambers says that she's fine with it just being a discretionary between council and CAO. So for 25,000, Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I'll be honest, I'm still opposed. I mean, this is just still extra money. This is more of a luxury item, I think, and a lot of these items are, but I would ask that if it were to move forward, I think, while I respect CAO Chambers and her ability to use discretion on this, I would suggest that any expenditures out of this reserve would have to be approved through council. I don't know if anybody's agreeable to that.
I would have to look to Councillor Cressman if that's a friendly amendment. Oh, right. Does somebody want to second Councillor Cressman's $25,000 allotment? Okay. So I'm not seeing a seconder. Does anybody want to do anything then with the discretionary budget at this time? Okay. Councillor Martin?
I'll second Councillor Cressman's motion for 25,000.
Okay. So now,
Through the chair, then, being that the motion's on the floor, I would propose an amendment to it, that if this passes, any expenditures through it should be approved by council.
Do you see that as a friendly amendment, Councillor Cressman?
I would like to see a threshold, because this, you can tie up, you can spend dollars to save dimes, and I see this as defeating the intent. This is, 25,000 is, yes, it's money, it's taxpayer. I'm hopeful that we can find 25,000 in other areas to save, and possibly more. So I think we have to have some, this sets a precedent of having a pot of money. We all know what some of the activities were this past year and where funds were needed, and in a very short order, and I think it gives discretion. That's what a discretionary fund is.
Councillor Wilkinson?
So through the chair, I appreciate your comments. Knowing that it won't be a friendly amendment, I would like to put forward an amendment and see if there's a seconder.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Wilkinson's request? Okay, Councillor Sadhu. All right, any other comments or questions on the amendment, which would be that it has to get council approval? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that's defeated. So we're back to the $25,000 discretionary fund. Any last comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? I'm hitting the microphone, and that carries. On to option number 5, which is the policy planner. This option is to insert the necessary flexibility to hire a new full-time position to address needs which will be raised by governance downloading through proclamation of Bill 23. Such downloading will result from ongoing regional governance reviews and, more importantly, by the pending announcements of the proclamation and implementation of Bill 23, which downloads planning policy to the local municipal level. The proposed budget is $140,000, but may be funded in full or in part by the Housing Accelerator Fund grant from the federal government under the program, which is set to be finalized before March 31st, 2024. This proposal may be added to the budget in a couple of ways. The additional FTE is added in conjunction on receiving a fixed dollar value from the half grant or full cost of the new FTE added, subject to clarity of the new downloading of responsibilities in separate reports to council. Such report would include any known details on grant funding opportunities, which may reduce the direct costs of a new position. CAO Chambers, I believe you had a comment? He is online? Okay. I believe Director Okrafka is joining us virtually, so he should be up on the screen in a moment. Good evening. Thank you for joining us, Director Okrafka. I don't know if you want to speak any more than the typed up few lines that I had read, but...
I don't think so. We've had this discussion previously that, well, certainly I would anticipate it's going to be a need at some point. But I'm comfortable waiting until the last minute, if you want to say it that way, until we find out exactly what the timelines for implementation and what details are included, and if there's pullback on any parts of what's been proposed in the legislation so far. So I think, no offense to the province, but given the track record of the province with pulling back on things once they're floated, I'd be inclined to, again, I'm raising this so that you know that it's not coming out of the blue down the road, but I think we can hold off and do a detailed report once we know the final details of the legislation, what's involved, and the tasks and the timeline for when we have to have it done. And I think it brings more clarity to it that way than hiring somebody anticipating that they may have work, and we certainly will have tasks that they can do, but I think the focus has to be on that Bill 23, and then obviously, as you're aware, Mayor Salomon, the delegations to the governance committee were certainly adamant that with the downloading of planning should come down the downloading of the tax revenues previously collected by the regional level for that service.
That was going to be my point, but thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, it seems like much of council was going to ask that question. And certainly I would say from the taxpayer's perspective, that would make the most sense for their pocket. But so with that then, councillors, if you're all amenable, we will just do nothing with this point and leave it to staff to bring back in a report when it's appropriate, when we hear more about downloading, if that works for you, Director Okrafka? Yep, very good.
Are we allowed to say enjoy your time?
Already gone. On to options 6 and 7, which is additional infrastructure reserve funding transfers. So during the 2023 budget, the actual net levy funding to reserves or directly into the capital project was reduced during the budget deliberations rather than increased from the prior year. The net reduction was $61,000 plus planned but deleted 2.8% additional tax levy contribution for 2023. With an inflationary index added, this value becomes $352,500. In addition to this inflation of non-residential construction, which was 8.1 for the period from June 2022 to June 2023, This inflation eroded the purchasing power of our contributions by $110,000. Committee has received clear messaging that the township's largest budget issue for the capital funding provided by the tax budget. And at this stage of our budget reviews, any incremental adjustments to the transfer to capital reserves portion contained in the draft budget will go towards further addressing the funding issue. Transfers to capital reserves need to increase by millions of dollars. That's really great sounding, by millions of dollars in the coming years, so that every step does help towards addressing the issue and bring financial stability closer to the municipality. The current draft budget only includes 3.1 inflationary adjustment over the last year's net contribution, plus 2.8% tax levy adjustment directly for capital funding, for a combined increase over 2023 of about $364,300. So this is looking, to summarize that, to increase our contribution to build our reserves up more due to the depletion over time. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I can't remember, what is the percentage that's included in that 10.6? With the reserves?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we've added 2.8% of tax levy directly, plus within the 3.1% inflation, we've got 3.1 inflation on last year's contribution. So there's 2.8 directly on the tax bill, and 3.1 was in that inflationary base of 3.1. So it's all in the 10.6. What we're discussing here is beyond that.
Yep, that was, through you, Mayor, that was my impression of this, is whether we wanted to top it up even more, because I think the net result of the 3.1 onto the 2.8 is 2.8868, if I do my math right. So I think that's what the actual parcel of it is. I was interested in, through you, Mayor, just one follow-up. I looked at what Wellesley did after their challenge last year, and they're down to 1% at this. I thought, well, I better not tell you what I thought.
Yes, I do know we've already discussed tonight about our reserves and that they are the most depleted in the report, the BMA study across the province. We have the lowest per capita. However, I do appreciate that we can't fix reserves in 1 year. And I do appreciate that, much to Lori's comments to us tonight, that this does impact people's lives. So I personally wouldn't be looking to increase beyond the levy contribution, but also I guess just be aware that that means we're going to have to put more money later on down the road when we have infrastructure capital projects, that we might be looking at more debt financing and carrying that to pay for any infrastructure improvements at this time. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, through you, Chair Salen. And I'm curious, Director Mullenhouse, if you have comments, if you're aware, if we don't approve these two items, are there certain, would it essentially be holding back on certain roads or certain projects? I know I've had, in the past year, I've had a number of requests regarding roads, fixing potholes, putting in a new road, this street needs to be replaced. So I'm just kind of curious if there's any way of talking about this in terms of numbers or projects or what might be delayed.
Through you, Chair. So in this year's 10-year capital, we've started with a slight increase to what our normal, we'll say, infrastructure spending would be in some of those specific categories. Bridges is one, but roads is another. Over the course of the 10-year, though, we have raised, I guess, our average spending in terms of capital, repair and rehabilitation. And I assume that, I can't really speak to the total connection to this particular infrastructure reserve, because I would suspect it addresses much more than just obviously our roads and bridges, but we are certainly looking to increase our spending in the roads and the bridge area. I may defer to the treasurer for further comment.
Through you, Madam Chair, any increase to the contribution of reserves, would immediately reduce the amount of debt that we have to issue for this year. And I circulated a document, and I'll be including it in the final budget package, that the capital reductions that you've already made in the capital budget have reduced our debt requirement for 2024 substantially. And that's correct, that sheet, and particularly the orange corner in the bottom. And so this option here was my challenge as the CFO, saying we've got a significant road to climb, or a significant hill to climb in this regard with the cash to capital contributions. Cost of construction is going through the roof at 8.1% last year, and our ability to even fix roads should be a cash basis. It should not be debt financed. And we're debt financing roads because we haven't got the contributions coming in from the tax levy. So this really is that challenge that says, how much are you prepared to push? And if I was your long-term treasurer, I would be pushing that every year, probably for the next 10 years. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this, councillors? Does anybody want to move any motion or just leave it without direction at this time? Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, more so just looking to clarify a couple items, because I see a mention here that it was a deleted 2.8% additional tax levy contribution for 2023. But if I'm not mistaken, our ask every year, and this was implemented in previous councils, but it's that the infrastructure reserve levy does increase, or there's a 2.8% increase every year to help rebuild this. What you're referring to is that the inflationary piece was never necessarily added to it, so there's where in essence, we're seeing that reduction of purchasing power. Is that what I'm reading correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I may, not quite. The inflation happens all the time, and I like to get in the habit of trying to stay on top of inflation so that we're not losing our purchasing power as we sleep. But when I say that 2.8% was deleted last year, in fact it was. We started off, last year there was two streams to fund our capital. One was a transfer to capital, or transfer to reserves, and one was levy fund our capital projects. And the total of that decreased from 2022 in 2023. So despite pushing up one by 2.8% of levy, we cut this one by more than that amount. And so the net was a reduction. And so I'm suggesting here, if you wanted to make that up, that's one amount. If you wanted to make up for inflation, that's another amount. But I've got the inflation covered for this year.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, yet another option from past councils and treasurer that remain to haunt us. That's all.
Any other questions or comments on this one at the time? All right, seeing none, we will move on and not do anything with that option at the moment. On to option number 8, which is additional infrastructure services staffing for development, engineering, construction management, and drinking water operation systems expansion. The proposal is to add 3 additional full-time engineering or operations staff. The staff are required for 3 different portfolio areas and will be funded by development revenue, cost recovery, and through offsetting consultant costs. Director Mollenhuis, did you want to make any comment in particular to this item?
Through you, Chair, maybe just to highlight a few points. just so council can refer back to a few items from the previous year. In particular, just speaking to the construction and capital project management staffing. So that was one that is also tied to Snyder's Road revenue, the reconstruction on the regional road. We would obviously, through the course of construction over the next couple of years there, we would be recouping some of the costs of that role. In addition to that, we would also be reallocating consulting fees that we currently pay and have planned to pay, but have the ability to draw back on that and to reallocate them towards the staffing resources. As you may know, as far as project-based consulting services, we maybe get a window of 3 months of part-time, we'll say, for an equivalent cost, whereas we could get a full-time, full year for the equivalent value. Second, it will just draw attention to the water wastewater operations staff, and so that obviously ties to the NIPFL private drinking water system and the conversion that's to take place there, and this is additional staffing resources to be able to operate and maintain that system.
Thank you. Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor. Initially, I still think it's a no-brainer, but I guess I'm concerned that when you add FTEs in a time when they're needed, do you look at time when their skill set may not be required or their work may not? My answer would be, looking superficially, is we've got a lot of stuff, a lot of employment land coming on stream, subdivisions coming on stream. I think this is going to be help that we need for quite a period of time. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, maybe you're referring to the development engineering staffing. That is certainly, yes, we do have growth windows and growth periods, but that is certainly a need that's not just a short window or even a medium window, we'll say. That's one that we will have continually. If we look at some of our comparators, so if we look at Woolwich, I believe that they have proposed this year up to 4 staff in that particular area, and I would think that they've been in the same sort of staffing, we'll say, for the past at least 5 to 6 years. And in terms of their workload, they're not looking to draw back in their staffing anytime soon. I would say we're in a very similar frame of mind there with respect to the volume of development work and our fee structure that's associated with it. So that is one that's been in development, I would say, since the 2020 timeframe and is substantial in terms of the revenue that we generate associated with development work.
Thank you. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So there's no cost to the taxpayer, and there will not be a cost to the taxpayer, correct, Director? So this isn't just a one-time a year where it's covered because of this, and then the following year it won't be.
Through you, Chair, that's correct. All 3 of these roles would be funded by either existing dollars, or it would be covered off through fees and charges.
Okay, no cost. Sign me up.
Is that you moving then a motion?
It most certainly is.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any other comments or questions on these roles? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. We just need more options that don't impact the tax levy. All right, so option number 9 is inclusion of the servicing costs of the recommended 2024 levy-funded debentures. So the draft budget presented for review included the issuance of debentures financing to fund necessary capital projects that otherwise would be funded by tax levy funding sources such as reserves, which are otherwise exhausted by other projects in the 2024 capital program. The estimated carrying cost of the proposed levy-funded debentures is $219,000 per year for 20 years. This amount will not be incurred during 2024, but will commence in 2025. Council can decide to continue past practice of deferring this cost to the following budget, or begin following industry best practice of including carrying costs in the budget in the year of debt approval. If this amount is not included in the 2024 tax levy budget, it must be added to the 2025 budget. Yes, I will turn it over to our interim treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I circulated again that same document in the orange box. You'll see that that number has changed from 219 down to $69,000. And so I just draw that to your attention. We're talking about adding $69,000 to the budget, not 219.
And just for clarity, is that carrying cost decreased because of the capital expenditures that council cut out?
That's correct. Through the adjustments that were made to the draft capital plan, we've reduced the total cost of the capital program. I've been able to move the dollars around. We freed up some reserve money and so on and so forth. So I've minimized the amount of debt that we need to issue, and so it's down to a carry cost of $69,000.
That sounds a lot nicer than the 219,000. We'll go to Councillor Martin, then Councillor Cressman after.
He's smarter than I am when it
Well,
comes to...
Through the chair, that's
I guess the
incorrect.
chair's opinion doesn't matter on this. We'll go to Councillor Wilkinson first.
No one is smarter than anybody here. We all contribute to this, and I appreciate our conversations. I appreciate you, Steve.
Valentine's Day was yesterday.
Oh, boy.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Valentine's Day was yesterday. I think we're still feeling the magic. Through the chair, the comment and my thought on this right now is that as per the package, there's actually a couple other items still to be discussed regarding capital budget. And I actually have an additional item I wanted to propose to Director Molyneux when we maybe come back to these capital budget items. So I'm wondering if we could defer the conversation on this particular piece until we've concluded conversations regarding the capital budget inclusions, because obviously it will ultimately affect the debt number at the end of the day. Is that, I think, agreeable? Yeah.
Councillor Martin?
Yeah, if I told you he was smarter than me, because that's great. What I was ready to propose was, could we cut that number and look at what the percentage would be, say 0.5% instead of 2%? Because in my opinion, it's important for us to be putting money into the debt and not having, what's that word, extrapolating or not, no, increasing when the debt increases even more because we're not paying for it. So I'd be happy to defer it and wait until we're in its entirety, but I think this is important.
So is that moved and seconded then, Councillor Martin? Are you seconding that? To defer it?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Cressman, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just a question to the interim treasurer, through you, Mayor. It's my understanding that this represents what we would have to pay once the debentures are issued.
Correct.
But the point is, they aren't issued this year, they will be issued next year, correct? Or are they issued, like last year, we had some debentures that were never issued because we didn't use the funds. So, and then I'm hearing from the Bank of Canada that we might have some rate cuts, which might be wishful thinking with the debt I carry, but let's just leave it at that. So anyhow, so I think we have to bear that in mind as well on this issue.
If I may, there was indeed some debt that was approved in 2023 to be issued in 23, and it got deferred to 2024 because those projects were having trouble getting off the ground and there were some approval issues and so on. When I asked my directors, as they prepare their capital plan, to push stuff out, and only include what you can get done, I'm anticipating that all of this debt will be issued this year and will become payable in 2025. So we won't necessarily have a debt payment to make in 24, but the premise is when you approve the debt, approve the payment.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I agree with the line of thinking here with Councillor Cressman and our interim treasurer. More so what I was getting at is I'm suggesting that we defer the conversation on this until we sort of have the number being accurate, because I anticipate there are potential I don't know if that number is reflective of some of these other items that we have to discuss, or if they're not. I don't know. So I'm just suggesting that we discuss these items, finalize that capital plan and budget prior to discussing this, so we can see the accurate number exactly, and then discuss options at that time.
Through you, Madam Chair, I follow your thinking, and I like the line of thought that you have there. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to satisfy your expectation that I can quickly come up with the new debt number on the fly, but I have no problem pushing this later in the meeting.
Through the chair, and I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, I'm looking at the time, I don't know, do we necessarily get through all this tonight, or is that something that particular item could potentially be finalized as sort of a Finance and Budget Committee meeting prior to a council meeting where the budget potentially could be tabled? If you follow that.
I have no trouble bringing forward a budget report and then a supplementary report on an updated debt carry cost, and then you could take that and dump it in if you chose to or not. So I could bring forward 2 reports on the 4th to council.
Okay, so it would be coming to council, not to finance committee, but you're satisfied from your end and staff-wise bringing those 2 reports? Okay. So Councillor Wilkinson, does that satisfy your request then if they're brought back to the council meeting on, I think it's the 5th? Sorry, the 4th? Okay, very good. And Councillor Martin, since you're the seconder, you're fine with that timeline? Okay. Any other questions or comments then on deferring this to our March 4th council meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to option number 10, which is the conversion of part-time to full-time fire prevention / public educator. This proposal is to convert a part-time position into a full-time position to increase the capacity of the department to meet expected service levels. With the recent closure of the Waterloo Region Community Safety Village, the need for additional local resources to meet educational and fire prevention work in the Wilmot Township community is ever more pressing. Demand on insight training and educational sessions in school, as well as other institutions and businesses, has risen since the closure. Public education is listed as the first line of defense against fires and is recognized as lowering the incidence of emergencies by empowering citizens to take proactive measures prior to an emergency happening, and thereby reducing suffering, death, and economic losses while building community resilience. Fire Chief Leeson, would you like to make any additional comment on this item?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just want to highlight that since we hired our full-time fire prevention officer, who is our chief fire prevention officer, we continue to struggle day to day just to keep up with the requested complaints. And with the part-time public educator being hired, we are starting to chisel away at the list of things that need to be done, but we're still not there. We're quite a gap, and if I could give a comparison, if you pick some of the smaller cities out there, like with similar population rates, in most cases they'll have 3 to 5 full-time prevention people, where we're running with basically 1.5. And again, we continue to struggle and meet just the basic things that we are required to meet. So I'm here to answer any further questions required.
Councillor Martin.
I would be ready to move that we approve this, I guess, do I call it an increase or approve this recommendation?
Okay, is there a seconder for that? I'm not seeing a seconder. Is there any additional discussion at this time? Councillor Cressman?
Again, I think I was reading in the record this morning about Woolwich didn't approve this request in their budget. Again, I think it's a nice to have. I would like to approve it. Unfortunately, I don't think the time is right, and it's not that I don't want to support or prevention.
Any other? Oh, yes.
Just through the chair, Woolwich didn't approve a training officer position, not a fire prevention public education position, for clarity.
Thank you. Councillor Dunstall.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I certainly see the value, Chief Leeson. I just think it's just such a tough year for us, and I'm hoping that perhaps you could hold off till 2025. And it seems like we're throwing everything into 2025, which is a habit that we got into, which has gotten us to where we are. So I hesitate saying that, but I do see the value. It's just that adding every percentage just makes it more difficult. That's my comment.
Yes, Chief Leeson.
If I may, through the chair, I will be coming back to council next year with a full-time fire prevention officer also on top of this, which if you move this to next year, you'll be asked for both positions. So I just want to give council a heads up because we are that far behind. We're not even, we're just not scratching the service. So it really is we're really having a real struggle keeping up.
I'm curious, Chief, in terms of, I know that you speak about the region's community safety village being closed. Where did that funding come from, and has that been redistributed if fire departments now need to pick up on fire prevention?
Through the chair, I don't know how that was funded. I believe it may have been regionally funded. I know the police put a lot of money into that as well, and they've redistributed those funds to other educational opportunities in there. So I think there was a variety of funding sources involved and donations and various factors. But I can't answer the question 100%.
Okay. And I know this may be legislated, I'm asking out of ignorance. Any of the training that we provide, is there any cost recovery in that could go towards paying for the staff being moved to full-time?
Through the chair, that would be no. There's no cost recovery model that I'm aware of out there in the industry when it comes to educating the public to keep them in a safe position. I should point to the ENR bylaw, to the establishing and regulating bylaw, that we have an approved schedule of frequency just to do routine inspections within the community, and we haven't even been able to touch that. We're not doing it at all. We just don't have the capacity. We get enough requests and complaints every week that our chief fire prevention officer is tasked with just keeping up with that. And in fact, in some cases, I have to get involved because of the capacity, the lack of capacity.
Councillor Martin?
Through you, Chair Salonen, I respect my colleagues and recognize that you're not ready to second a motion. I do worry about not putting money into this area, and I wanted to publicly thank Chief Leeson and Fire Prevention Officer Andrew Machenko for coming to our church on Sunday morning. They spent at least 2 hours there. It would be my guess that they're taking that out of their personal time. So I want to thank you for that. I see our fire department working hard, and I worry if we don't, if we're scrimping in this area, it's going to cause us problems.
Councillor Crescent.
Through you, Mayor, excuse me, for my edification, just give me an example of a complaint, and I'm not quite sure what you mean by that and what the response would be to that complaint that you don't have the time to follow up.
Through the chair, to clarify, we have the time to follow up. We do follow up. We are required to follow up. Just to give you a snapshot of a typical complaint, we had an employee complain about their workplace and that they felt there were some fire safety violations in the workplace, as an example. The chief fire prevention officer will attend that location, will look at the complaints to see and determine if there is in fact infractions. Once they go through that process, they have to go back, do any research required, look up the building plans, make sure everything meets requirements. We may have to work with the building department on something, So what I'm trying to get at is that simple request or complaint could turn into 2 or 3 days, not of solid work, but of multiple hours being spent over a course of a week, because then you have to do a follow-up inspection, you have to maybe write orders, then you have to take those back, et cetera, et cetera. So that one complaint can encompass, an entire week, not an entire 40 hours, of course, but various times throughout that week, making phone calls, emails, et cetera, et cetera. It's really laborious because we have to make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's if it has to go to court or if we have to write charges.
Councillor Dunstall and then Councillor Stu.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Did I understand you when you said that there were some legislative, I don't know what you would call them, that were not meeting? Is that what you said?
Through the chair, we're not meeting our ENR bylaw, approved ENR bylaw cycles of inspections that was agreed on at that time. At that time when that was approved, that was through the fire master planning. It was approved, and then the anticipation was that we would build our capacity to meet those objectives. We're a little behind meeting those objectives because we haven't had the staff capacity to get there. It was always understood. There's nothing punitive to the township or council for not meeting that. We're just not meeting our goals, and my fear is we'll continue to delay and delay.
Councillor Stu.
2 questions. So just to clarify on that, that's an internal goal that we have that's not legislated, that we have to meet those requirements that you were just talking about here?
Through the chair, the legislation states that we are required to provide public education and fire prevention services. The frequency is determined by council.
And then my second question is for fire prevention, how many orders were issued in the last year, for example, by our one full-time?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information in front of me. I could find out for you, but I don't have that at my fingertips.
Councillor Cressman, then Councillor Dunstall.
Again, I should have connected the dots, but what is the financial implication of making this part-time to full-time? I think I saw it somewhere, but, you're on the other page then. The blue one. Okay.
53.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Dunstall.
I have changed my mind, and I am going to second that motion. I don't know if it's going to go through, but I will second it.
Councillor Martin, are you still willing to put it forward? Okay. So that has now been moved and seconded to approve the conversion of part-time to full-time fire prevention and public educator. Any other questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. That is everything on the memorandum. Are there additional items under 10.1?
No.
Okay, so 10.1 is dealt with. We will move on to, correct, sorry. The clerk did actually bring to my attention on 10.1, back remembering one of our first Budget and Finance Committee meetings, Council did actually approve the $15,000 for mailing to be added to the budget. That was my expression as well. But there were a lot of motions that day, and what the motion was for the mailing to be approved and everything else to be deferred to the meeting that we just had. So with that, the clerk just wants direction if we wanted to still see that go forward to the budget or not, as we clearly had discussed differently and felt that that could be taken out from the discretionary funds, which are now approved. So I will leave that to council to decide if we want to keep the 15,000 there. Councillor Dunstall?
I would say to remove it. I would say to remove it.
So we can definitely do that. We just need to reconsider, and I'm going to have the clerk walk us through that process.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor. To council, so as you already have a motion, even though the minutes weren't approved, that really doesn't matter at this point because there is a motion that has been giving direction to include that training, so the mailing, sorry. So at this point, we would be looking for a motion to reconsider that decision, and then that's a 2/3 requirement vote. So if you receive 2/3 in favor, then council would then be asked to put forward a motion to remove that from the draft budget.
Then I would like to put through a motion to reconsider that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Cressman. There is no discussion on this part, so all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So now we've reconsidered. So Councillor Dunstall, would you like to put forward your motion to not approve?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to put through a motion not to approve the $15,000 mailing.
Through you, Mayor, if I could just suggest some wording, I would say to remove it, or just to remove it from the draft budget because it was put in. So
I would put through a motion to remove it from the draft budget. That's okay.
Very good. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion or comments? I mean, we have already talked about it tonight. All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Keeping our clerk happy is very important. Happy clerk, happy council, I think. All right, now we will jump into report 10.2, which is annual hardware, software, and network infrastructure upgrades. So the recommendation is that report COR 2024-11 regarding annual hardware, software, and network infrastructure upgrades be received as information. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. And I will turn it back over to CFO Dan Elliott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carl Jeffries is here with us, our Supervisor of IT, sitting behind me. This report was brought forward at the request of Budget Committee for a little further explanation with respect to our hardware replacement cycle and our plans in that regard. And so this report stands pretty much on its own that while we are doing this, we do have some issues with respect to compliance and readiness for Microsoft 11. Many people have been using Microsoft 11 for quite some time. We're still on 10. Many of our machines are not capable of being fitted with that piece of software. And then when you've got parts of the organization on one software and others on the other, it causes some challenge. So we're looking to replace our fleet, some this year and some next year, sort of a half and half to get to that point of being able to migrate to Microsoft 11. And following that, on the suggestion of this committee, we did look at what our colleagues are doing, and many of them are moving to 5-year life cycle on these laptops. And so we will begin that process on the Microsoft 11 compliant units. We'll go to a 5-year life cycle, but we have 2 years left to get to that point. So this year and next. And then there was a brief discussion as to what do we do with the old ones. And I think the summary is we're very careful. Data is still on these machines. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's echoed in the hardware. And we take every precaution we can to make sure that there's no data on these units when they leave the building. Even if we're using a contractor, we have to be very careful who we use and the certifications that are coming. So I just leave that report with you for information.
Thank you. Councillor Cressman.
I believe we've had extensive discussion on this previously, and I would commend Carl Jeffries for the detail that's included in this report. I'm fully convinced we need this to move the Township Corporation forward, and so I would move that it be included in the capital budget.
Yeah.
So that would be an amendment. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Martin. So voting on this to amend the current recommendation that's on the floor, that it be included into the 2024 budget. Councillor Wilkinson, you have a comment on the amendment?
Through the chair, just prior to that, maybe just looking for guidance or reassurance, did we defer this decision during the capital budget conversation, or did we include it in the capital budget?
Through you, Madam Chair, my read of the activities of committee was that it was deferred pending a report. And so your motion tonight, and I apologize for failing to include it in the written motion, your motion tonight to include it in the capital budget formally is appreciated, so it's necessary.
So through the chair, I don't know if it's been seconded, but I would second. Yeah, okay.
It has been seconded. So we will vote on the amendment first. So all those in favor of the amendment to add it to the budget, that carries unanimously. Any other questions then on the now amended motion? Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
Pardon me, through the chair, I did appreciate the options being brought forward in terms of what we may be able to do with the devices. I did read somewhere recently that the city of Kitchener, I think, donates or finds a way to repurpose. I appreciate as well the comments about the information may be sort of imaged elsewhere in the device itself, but I wouldn't mind hearing from IT, not necessarily in the immediate future, but at some point in the near future, about options that is there a potential cost recovery here for us, or ways that we can dispose of it, and even if we can verify that we've removed the data and made a donation, I think that would be worthwhile to explore.
Can I leave that as direction? Yes, I'm getting a nod from Carl there. So thank you, Carl. We'll look forward to that in the future. Councillor Martin.
I'm not sure if this is most fitting here, but a week ago Friday, I was at a hockey game, and there was Carl Jeffries, as well as Rajwinder Ubi, desktop support technician, and what is Carl's title? Supervisor of Information Technology. And he was going to be pulling wires after the game was over. He was going to be pulling wires. I don't know if he was there all night, but I just want to commend him for his weekend work.
Very good. I'm sure work is always a bit nicer when you get to see a hockey game too. And it was a pretty good game. But Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I remember reading somewhere here, and I'm just trying to find it, that there was some, does this include the web design improvement? No, that was Donna? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, separate department.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson, did you have a question?
Yes, just looking at the time and what we do have left, I'm wondering if prior to moving on to the next items, we could have a short recess.
That we could probably do. We're going to vote on this first, and then I believe we have to do a vote for a recess. Yeah.
My apologies.
Nope,
Let's
that's
vote.
all good. All right, so just so that we're all on the same page here, the recommendation has been amended so that we add this to the 2024 budget. So all those in favor, that carries unanimously. May I have a motion to take a 5-minute recess? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's great. We will be back here at 7:45. All right, thank you for coming back from our recess. We will need a motion to reconvene. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. For the clerk, we're reconvening at 7:51 p.m. We're on to report item 10.3, which is cost reduction options for the 2024 draft operational budget. This report is to be received for information at this time. May I have a mover to get it on the floor? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, and I will turn it back over to Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the request of this committee, staff went back and went through the budgets again, fine-tooth comb, looking for options for reductions where possible, service adjustments if that was an option. It was a tough slug, I know that, and before you are a number of options, some of which may not sound initially as easy to put in as others, and there's a few in there where we've said you can make this adjustment easily. So I turn it back to you, Madam Chair, to perhaps walk through these down the list one by one, or some other way that you wish.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, we're fine walking through them one by one, and the clerk is just suggesting if anybody wants to do anything in particular with each item, that we make them amendments to the main motion and then pass one final motion as we go through the evening. So, we will start with option number 1, which is contracted services reduction. So this is in the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer. The service level would be prompt website changes and enhancements. The cost impact is a $2,000 reduction for 2024, and the risk will increase the amount of time required to make web updates and increase reliance on internal staff to troubleshoot and make updates, taking time away from other core activities. Did anybody want to do anything with this item or add comment? Councillor Martin?
I apologize for being confused. I thought we were on, so where is this report? I was just on the agenda.
Yes, page 5 of 14. We'll just wait a moment to make sure that you have the correct report pulled up. I think everybody has found what page we're on. And with that, I am just going to quickly turn it back over to Mr. Elliott, because he did just want to make note of a amendment change on the revised agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After the initial publishing of this agenda with this cost reductions options for 2024 draft operating budget, two items came to our attention that needed minor amendments, and so they were addressed in a separate memo on top. So you'll have a table that has two yellow squares in it, and that's probably the best table to be following tonight. And the commentary is in both reports. And the motion is to receive both for information at this time.
Very good, thank you. Okay, now that we're all on the same page, we've caught up with the updates that were added since the original publishing of the agenda. Does anybody have any comment, or do they want to do anything with option 1, which would be a potential cost reduction of $2,000, and this is the prompt website changing contract services?
I would say that you...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cressman, if you just want to turn on your microphone.
No, unless others are going to raise it. I see 1 and 2 remaining. We could have discussion around item number 3 and number 4. I think those are the two that.
All right. So I see no objections to leaving the option 1. Option 2, I will give a chance. Does anybody want to pull that item? No. Okay. So we will go into option 3 as suggested by Councillor Cressman, which is the leadership training. It's a contracted service. And this is succession planning for current leaders. The investment in leadership roles demonstrates commitment to staff and recognizes their value. The cost impact is $15,000. And the risk is can reduce the amount of training needed to ensure strong leaders who help enhance the cultural corporate culture. Leadership training increases staff retention and encourages skills and behavior required to lead teams in moving the township forward. Councillor Cressman.
Yeah, I would speak in favor of this. I see this as an important part of staff retention and development. I see it happening in majority of the organizations that I've had exposure to, and so I would speak in favor of the $15,000 for this.
I would also agree. I think it's very important to invest in our wonderful staff here and provide them with the opportunity for leadership training. Does anybody want to remove this item, or I guess have this item? Councillor Wilkinson, is there?
Through the chair, I would look to remove this and save the money. I'm a firm believer. I think I see it as this is a spending on additional training above and beyond. I think this is something that could come culturally and also be potentially addressed through a strategic plan, and just a change in the way that we approach leadership from the top. But yeah, I would say we could move to reconsider this year and potentially in the future.
Is there a seconder then for this item to be removed from the budget? Councillor Sadhu, any comments or questions on this? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of removing? All those opposed? And that is defeated. Option number 4, which is lockout training and hazard assessments. This service level can be paused in 2024 as the township puts more focus on the operating budget to ensure health and safety priorities such as first aid kits are current, and the township is meeting all legislative requirements with health and safety equipment. This cost impact is $13,500. The risk would be the activity can be delayed for 2024 while other priorities are focused on, such as WSIB Excellence Program and health and safety. Questions or comments on this one? Councillor Cressman?
I would see this in the risk assessment saying it can be easily removed. So I would.
So you're asking
for it to be removed.
To be removed. All right. Is there a seconder to that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right. That carries. For Community Services Department, we have the 30 Neville Street property. This is option 1. And it's to forego taking occupancy until July 2024. The cost impact would be $50,000 additional cost recovery from 30 Neville Street property tenant. The risk is $50,000 in cost recovery revenue would not be included in the 2025 budget. Additionally, the full property and utility expenditure budget would also be included in the 2025 budget that accounts for an additional $25,000 due to full occupancy and operations, and a further total of $75,000 would be added to the 2025 budget, creating approximately a 0.7% tax increase.
This one was one of the ones that were.
I'm really glad I have a great clerk. I'm just going to have him read. This was one of the items that was amended since the publication of the original.
That's right, Mayor. So through you, your memo on the top cover there identifies option, it's option 1 in the memo, but it's certainly not option 1 following through. So 30 Neville Street did get reduced from 50,000 to 36,400. So just so we're clear on what you're voting on or considering.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Chair Sallin, I have a question. How does this affect the fire department? I understand that the sooner that they can move over to Neville Street, the better. If we delay things, will this delay any of that process?
Through the chair, this will not impact the fire department. We're more than happy to work through the process and be part of the solution to this issue.
And Director Catania.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, as well, I know that we have some items for final budget for capital, and it won't affect any of our plans when we look at any type of architectural renovations before taking occupancy.
My question, and I believe this would be for you, Mr. Elliott. I know it's not best practice to include this type of windfall into operational budgets. What if it weren't put into the operational, so if it remains as currently is, what does happen to that $36,000?
Excellent question, and I appreciate it. The $36,000 would truly be a windfall into the 2024 operating budget. It would drive surplus deficit. It would just fall to the bottom line. The reason it's not a best practice to do this is it's an unsustainable revenue. We know that it will not continue past June, and so putting it in the budget is like putting a crutch under the budget that has to get kicked out next year. So that's why it's not a best practice to do it. I'd leave it at that.
Thank you. Does anybody want to do anything with this item? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I think from the preamble on the front page, it's that the tenant hasn't made alternative arrangements and wants to continue there. So I think we don't have any choice but to, I guess my question was similar to yours, was this whole idea, if it's a windfall into the bottom line, it's going to circle around to being added to the reserves. So it seems kind of like an in and out. You collect the money in taxes, and then you have it in the bottom line. It just pads your bottom line. So anyhow, that just strikes me as convoluted, but that's just me.
Very good. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, while we're talking about it, I mean, while it is a crutch, we have also identified discretionary funds that has increased the tax ask. Let's assume potentially we don't spend those discretionary funds, but that is something that could be reviewed again next year as to whether or not we include that in the operating budget going forward. This essentially does, in a roundabout way, work as that potential offset for it, which, again, we know eventually we're going to have to budget for the full cost of this thing, which we anticipate. But it does help offset the discretionary fund. It will, in some way, shape, or form, eventually make its way back into the reserve. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm saying maybe we do include this to offset that cost, and then next year, we will probably have the conversation again on the operating cost regarding discretionary funds. So I would be inclined to look at this and say, well, maybe we do include it or forego, and then essentially take these funds to help offset that. That's my thought.
So is that you putting forward an amendment to include it in the operational
Through
budget?
the chair, more so furthering the conversation, but considering an amendment. I don't know if there would be support. I'd be curious to hear other thoughts.
Move it.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any other conversation on this topic? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to community services, option number 2, which is seasonal parks/facilitators laborer positions. So this would be a reduction in seasonal parks and facilities laborer positions. This reduction lowers service delivery to the facilities cleaning, sports field maintenance, and horticulture, which would be beautification of flower beds across the township. The cost impact would be a reduction of 2 seasonal positions, which would be 1,120 hours, and creates a savings of $19,040. The risk would be absences, sicknesses, off-time requests are becoming more cumbersome to operations. Filling in for special events and tournament shifts becomes more difficult, spreading hours out equally amongst crew, as well as difficulty filling shifts in absences, sickness, or time off requests when they happen. Cost savings may not be realized with increased overtime and staff fatigue, as well as lower standard of service delivery with responsibilities for sports field setup, facility cleaning, and special events facilitation, areas of revenue and inspections, as well as beautification of flower beds or potential new service levels to address the Mike Scout wetlands or waste receptacles on Snyder's Road will not be accomplished. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to Director Catania, I'm curious. I mean, I'm kind of torn in between. I see this as a low-hanging fruit, but at the same time, understand the value of it. I'm just curious because I know last year I kept an eye on the postings, and I wonder if these positions even got filled last year. Did we have these on staff last year, or is this something that we may struggle to recruit for again?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Wilkinson, we did fill these positions. However, they were filled somewhat late in the season, almost the end of June, when traditionally we would get these positions filled right after exams and from the universities. So I believe, just so that there's some context to this as well, we do have 6 seasonal positions, so we'd be reducing the 6 down to 4.
Out of curiosity, do we apply for any of the student work grants provided through the federal government for this?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, yes, we do. And I believe it's still open at this point. We are throwing an application in for this because there is a green initiative that can be put towards this as well.
Any other questions at this time, councillors? Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Mayor Salonen mentioned in her reading overtime, and that the savings may not be as great because of overtime. Was there a lot of overtime last year? Do you know? And what did that come in at?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Dunstall, I don't have the exact numbers for what our overtime budget is. I'd have to report back to you on that. However, when we do reduce some of our part-time hours, then we are asking specifically for some of the special events. When we look at Mopar Fest, we look at Fall Fair, those type of things, we would be relying a lot more on the full-timers, even if they've already worked their schedules, to potentially come in for 8 hours and work overtime if we don't have the part-time help.
Sorry, follow. So then you would be paying time and a half to people who are getting paid more hourly, or a salary?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, to Councillor Dunstall, we would obviously try to leverage our existing part-time complement to fill those so that we can look at those as proper cost savings. If we can't, then we would be looking at the full-timers to step in.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I think given that they're seasonal, given that the wage, I think maybe some of our question is whether the wage rate is adequate to be an inducement to students. I think that this is an area that the public, our residents, see as service, and our soccer pitches, our ball fields our flower beds. Those are all things that I think are important to our residents, and I'd hate to see the service level. I think COVID is one thing. I think service in this area should be maintained, and I would speak against not going forward with this.
I would agree. Your mic is still on, Councillor Cressman. Anybody want to do anything with this particular item? Okay, seeing none, we will move along to corporate services. So option number 1 for corporate services is project funds for Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee. The purpose of these funds is to cover any unbudgeted expenses that arise from the township's participation in the Grand River Accessibility Committee, including honorariums for facility accessibility inspectors or projects such as development of facility accessibility design standards. The cost impact is $500 savings to the tax-funded operating budget. The risk is, as a public sector organization, the township has an obligation to meet the requirements under the AODA by January 1st of 2025. Facility inspections play a key role in obtaining feedback from the Accessibility Advisory Committee to help the township achieve legislative compliance. Likewise, to support legislative compliance, the township is often invited to participate in cross-municipal projects as a member of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, having funds available to allow the township to contribute to these projects. Comments on this, Councillor? Councillor Cressman?
Include it and move on, and I would recommend that our mayor not have to be tasked with reading these. It will be assumed that we've either read them or made notes. I've put check marks, etc. So I think just to save your voice.
That is very kind. I don't know if it's timely that you requested it on this particular one. I tend to read all of them for an accessibility perspective, actually, for those viewing along, but I'm happy if council, for time's sake, as this information is all public, to not have to read them. It's not that I like the sound of my own voice. So.
Through you, Mayor, I thought of you specifically when I read this.
Thank you.
Your family situation.
Thank you. Okay, so we will jump along to option 2 then, if nobody has questions on option 1. So eliminate archives budget. Any comments on this one? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to option number 3, which is bylaw enforcement part-time hours. Councillor Cressman?
I think this was suggested. It wasn't needed. It wasn't used. So this is an easy one to remove.
Very good. So that amendment is moved by Councillor Cressman. Is there a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Dunstall? I'm not certain if that's a full hand up or thinking about it.
I'm not certain it is either. I just want to make sure I understand. When you're removing it, you're saying that we're taking that savings, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay, all right. I'm good.
Yes, so removing it from the budget,
Yes, thank
which
you.
results in the cost savings.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and it didn't get used. Sorry, I did offer it to Councillor Dunstall first to second. Sure. Okay. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to option number 4, which is reduction to clothing uniform budget. Councillor Dunstall?
That's a minimal amount, and I would just suggest we leave it in there.
Very good. Anybody opposed to that? Okay, seeing none. Option 5, which is reduce contribution to municipal election reserve. Okay, seeing no comments on that. Glad that we all want to have good elections. Option number 6 is reduce membership budget, reduce membership budget by $1,120. This is for the title is just throwing me off.
Canadian Association.
Thank you. Yes, for the
Municipal Administrator.
yes, the CAO's Canadian Association Municipal Administrator membership fee. I will turn it over to Mr. Elliott.
Sorry, the proposal here is to remove the former director of corporate services attendance at a conference by AMO. the CAO will still has provision in her budget still to attend AMO. This is to remove an additional administrative position attending.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that clarification because I didn't quite understand that when I was reading it. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I move that we remove this from the budget.
And is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Option number 7, which is administrative fees revenue budget overstated. Any comments or questions on this one apart from Councillor Cressman's candor?
Just when we thought we had saved $50,000.
All right. Seeing none, on to infrastructure services. Actually, I do have one question before we go there, because it is on membership fees. Could staff report back on our membership fee to TAPMO? I know that North Dumfries has removed their membership, top aggregate producing municipalities of Ontario, and I'm no longer an executive on the board. I didn't run for re-election, but I'm just curious on the potential cost savings of that as North Dumfries has stepped out as well. We don't have any other close municipalities involved. Okay, on to infrastructure services. Option 1, which is bridge and culvert maintenance operating budget, which is minor culvert replacements. Any comments or questions on this one? Nope. Okay. Option number 2 is road. Oh, yes, Councillor Cressman.
Can I ask a question on that? You're going so fast now because
I'm sorry. I didn't realize Goldilocks could be bald.
I'm not. I had this one highlighted for removal because I understood from the risk is that the provision is there in the budget for large culverts and that it is enough to cover small culverts. So I was confused, and that's why I was looking at removing this. So,
through you, Chair, I would suggest that this would be a one-time removal for us. I think we could deal with the new capital budget line for the large-size culvert replacements, and we could see what we could do to make do for some of the smaller ones as well.
So Councillor Cressman, did you want to move an amendment then with that information?
I would move that the 20,000 be removed from the budget.
That's seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to option number 2, which is roadside operating budget for tree and bush removal. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Director Mullenhouse, I do recall last year we had an issue on Hayesville and people were complaining about the removal or how they had been removed and that there was a mess. How will this reduction impact that? And I believe you had said to me that it takes turns through the township, correct?
Through you, Chair. So this item is specific to tree removals. So this would actually be for our backlog, I guess, in terms of the dead trees within the right-of-way. So this particular item is full removal of dead trees. So this item would be more or less one tree, we would suggest, out of the maybe 15 or so that we get to in a year.
Thank you.
Councillor Cressman.
I would speak against removing this. I think with the emerald ash borer, we have an increased number of trees. Ash tend to be very shallow rooted, and in high winds, you can see them coming down in multiple areas. And again, I would say it poses a threat along our trails as well, any dead ash. So I would speak against removing this.
All right. Councillor Wilkinson? No? Okay, I was just going to say, we leave it as is, because without an amendment, it doesn't need to be removed. So, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to Director Mahoney, I'm just wondering, you're talking about removing them in the right-of-way. Is there any crossover or cost recovery that we could potentially see through ANOVA removing some of these trees, given their locations?
Through you, Chair, no. So with respect to trees that maybe are impacted by hydro, they undertake their own process to maybe do their own trimming, but the majority of removals and whatnot would be through our own budget.
Great. Councillor Cressman.
Just as a side note for the brush trimming for sight lines, that I think is a flail-operated arm boom that circulates around townships. I think that's what people were objecting. I'm fortunate enough to have a neighbor who graciously came along my road allowances and cleaned off some brush. He has one of these for himself. Doesn't look pretty when it's done, but it's very effective, and I think sight lines are very important for lanes or fields coming out onto roads to get sight lines for vehicles.
All right, so it looks like everybody wants to keep the tree and brush removal in, so on to option number 3, roadside operating budget for concrete curb, gutter, and sidewalk repairs. Any comments or questions on this one? Okay, seeing none. Option number 4, loose top operating budget for Wilmot line regraveling. And the clerk actually has comment.
Through you, Mayor, this is actually the second one on our memo where there's a slight change, and the budgeted savings is a net $75,000.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to Director Mahoney, just to confirm, so this was initially budgeted in 2023, but we did postpone it.
Through you, Chair. So there's a portion of this that is will be a carry forward item, and that's for a portion of the material required. That item was budgeted in 23. However, there are elements budgeted for in 24 that could be a savings. So we could choose to do, instead of the 3 to 4 lifts of gravel that we would apply, we may be able to reduce that by a lift and still at least for this season, get the intent of that regraveling and repurposing for that road surface.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I know there's some comments in here regarding cost and potentially looking at how this relates to the Schneiderland. Not knowing where the costs lie at this time and ultimately what the outcome of that will be. My concern is that we potentially burden the taxpayer with this, which is something to be discussed. So not to get too far off topic, but I would move that we actually remove this from the budget if we can reduce it by that lift, and that's the number that's being proposed here, then I move that we remove it.
Director Mullen.
Just to clarify, so this number is not just for a single lift. This would be for the entirety of what's needed for the full program. So we can look to reduce it, but I can't give you that we'll say that marginal change number at this point. We can certainly look towards clarifying that for you, though.
So through the chair, I appreciate the clarification. That is helpful. With that said, I'd still look to say I'm moving to remove this from the budget. I think there's further conversation surrounding this area that still needs to take place.
Is there a seconder for that amendment at this time? Seconded by Councillor Sadoo. I have a question, Director Mullenhughes, as this is a joint road with Waterloo. What does that mean if our council chooses not to go ahead with a project that their council has approved?
Through you, Chair. So this budget item would be for, I would say, routine maintenance. I think if we're deferring routine maintenance like this, There are challenges with that, and we could see some additional, we'll say, grading and whatnot, and response times that we would have specific to Wilmot Line. We deal with the City of Waterloo on a biennial schedule, so every other year, roughly, to re-gravel this road, and we have to do so because of the volumes of traffic on the road. I would suggest this isn't one to entirely cut from the budget. We should maintain something here to do some work there, to do some work along the line. So I can't give you a number at this point if we're going to reduce slightly, but I would suggest the full removal may not be a good option at this time.
Okay. Councillor Crescent?
Yes, just a question. I noticed the Wilmot line from Burlett's Road to, I guess, is it Herbsville Road? That was down the low part, and it was widened, ditches were dug out, looked like new culverts were installed, and at some point in time in the last year or two, compared to what had been done previously, it's often a back way that I take to Elmira to pick up parts just to see farmland. So I'm interested, was that part of our work or what?
Through you, Chair, yes, we have done a few culvert replacements. I think we've added some guide rail as well, but we typically run the re-graveling program, and with our boundary road agreement that we established, I believe in 2021 with the City of Waterloo, we now undertake the full year maintenance for that entire road.
Through you, Mayor, I had earmarked this as one to pull out, thinking it was the other boundary road with Perth, and then I reread it and found it was the one with Waterloo, and especially in the neighborhood of Schneider, the Schneider land and Rare. I think this is one that we need to do a regular maintenance, figure out with the City of Waterloo what we're going to do in terms of the potential upgrades that would potentially be needed. I just can't see us making significant cuts on this one, maybe just marginal. So I would speak against removal.
Councillor Martin?
Through you, Chair Salen, I agree with Councillor Cressman, but I wonder if I misunderstood Councillor Wilkinson, because are you wondering, Councillor Wilkinson, if we pull this now, if we're going to have a cost later with the Schneider Lands decision?
Through the chair, I think it's to be determined what happens with the Schneider Land. Per Director Mahoney's, this is part of the regular maintenance of it. I think that is part of my thought, is that there is potential conversation to be had down the road here. I don't know. I think I'd be interested in hearing potentially more. I agree with a lot of the arguments that are made for keeping, but I'm wondering what a fractional or what you would suggest. Like, are we cutting this back by 50% would be possible, or what? I don't know.
May I suggest that you ask for information and we don't make a final decision on this particular item until, we can ratify it at council meeting?
Well, through the chair, I think I put forward a motion. It wasn't seconded, and then I believe Councillor Cressman just put forward a motion.
I think
yours was seconded by Councillor Sadhu. That's why I'm asking if you would.
Well, potentially look at amending it. I didn't see that Councillor Sadhu had seconded. Thank you for mentioning it. So through the chair to Director Mahoney, would it be agreeable to get information back by the March 4th meeting?
I'm getting a yes, it would.
Let's do it.
Then you're happy with that, Councillor Crescent?
is that a friendly amendment, or do we do a referral? Okay.
All right, so that's a friendly amendment then, that this particular amendment item is seeking additional information back for the March 4th meeting on this particular topic. So all those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to option number 5, which is reduction in seasonal student hours in the engineering department. which is reducing 400 hours, would provide about $9,000 cost savings for the tax-funded operating budget. Any comments or questions on this one? Or action? Okay. Seeing none, on to development services. The planning section office supplies. I'm going to be really honest, at $150, I think that they can keep their office supplies. On option number 2, which is heritage section, minor capital. And just so everybody's aware, I don't know if you all saw, but Director Okrafka is back online to answer questions. Any comments or questions on the heritage section or action? Okay, seeing none. Option number 3, economic development program funds. Any comments or questions? Action? Okay. On to option number 4, which is building section. Any comments or questions on this one? All right, seeing none, I believe that brings us to the end of that particular report. So, what we did is we made amendments throughout, so our motion will now be as amended. And we'd already approved all of the amendments at that point. So, any questions before we do the final vote to pass this motion as amended? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to report 10.4. I will now call on CAO Chambers to speak to her report.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, Chair, we're in Finance Committee. Yes, Council had directed back on January 25th that I report back on staffing resources and potential reallocation of that within the Office of the CAO, and to see if there could potentially be savings. I have almost finalized the report, but with Council's indulgence, I'd like to bring it back on February 26th. I'm looking at all of the work plan for the year and ensuring that we have appropriate resources to be able to deliver on that work plan, and also Council's goals, and also the request to provide some additional support for Council. So I will be bringing that back on the 26th.
Thank you. On to report 10.5, and there is a recommendation, and that is that report CS 2024-04 capital budget replacement of a 2013 park service vehicle with a 2024 park stake truck be received for information, and that the Finance and Budget Committee of Council approve the 2024 capital budget request form number 13, which is capital budget replacement of 2023 park services vehicle with park stake truck, to be included in the 2024 capital budget that will be brought back to Council for final approval. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. I will now invite our Director of Community Services, Mr. Catania, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salmon. This is a report back from our previous budget meeting regarding the capital project for the capital fleet replacement of end-of-life pickup truck for a more robust park stake truck. We currently have a service vehicle, which is a 2013 Dodge Ram that has a lot of kilometers on it. It has surpassed its estimated serviceable life. It was currently reported as having a deteriorated oil tank and previously equipped with a refurbished transmission to ensure only short-term operability. This park service vehicle no longer suits the needs of the Parks and Facilities team, and it is needed for replacement. Recognizing the growing array of equipment, machinery, and service resources, the Parks and Facilities team have identified a pressing need to source a new fleet vehicle with increased payload, torque, and cargo capacity. The replacement of this Dodge Ram is an opportunity to replace with a stake truck that can better serve the community and provide greater efficiencies for the department amongst budgetary pressures, that is. So some of the efficiencies that I think Council was looking for that I'm reporting out here is that it's an ability for this new stake truck to transport greater payloads of material, saving time and material costs, ability to tow heavier equipment from job site to job site. It's more versatile, so we're able to switch operational responsibilities quicker and more efficiently. So this would be an example of having tree maintenance, going from that to trail repairs, to horticulture, to ball diamond maintenance, and enhanced special event facilitation, so taking picnic tables and of that nature in those type of, in the stake truck. Furthermore, stake trucks are more durable than regular pickups and they are subject to annual safety requirements, which also can contribute to a longer life cycle when they are properly maintained, that is. So staff at this point is recommending proceeding with 2024 capital budget request form number 13 as presented. I'm happy to discuss and answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much, Director Catania. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm wondering what the $20,000 upgraded cost covers.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Dunstall, that extra $20,000 is dealing with more of a heavier duty pickup truck with the that ability to whoop from a cargo capacity as well.
Councillor Cressman.
Just realizing where you're going to be using it, does this require a special license for operation? And will the part-time students, et cetera, that were possible to drive the 1500 Ram not be able to drive this on an ongoing basis?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Cressman, no, there will not be a special license requirement for this upgrade to this size vehicle.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Cressman and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Just a quick follow-up. Again, have we confirmed that 100,000 is within the realm of possibility to purchase this? Because I know when you get a loaded pickup, it can be $75,000, $80,000 very quickly, and so I'm just trying to sort out what it looks like to get a stake truck of this nature.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Cressman, the short answer is yes, we've done some preliminary budget numbers for that vehicle.
Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Dunstall.
Through the chair, the plan for the Dodge, is it to be recommissioned within our fleet or is it to be disposed of? I just curious.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Wilkinson, this vehicle would probably cost us too much to keep if we wanted to keep it in service. So we are going to look at trying to recoup through a sale, whether it's an auction, and do that through our proper procurement measures.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. This may not be an option at all, but I just wanted to put it out there. Do we ever lease those types of vehicles?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Dunstall, there is, I think from last year in our budget through our fleet management piece in one of our GLs, we do lease a regular pickup truck, so there could be an option this way, but at this point, that's something for this vehicle we haven't explored.
Councillor Cressman.
I would move that we include this in our capital budget.
It's already been moved and seconded, but thank you very much, Councillor Cressman. So yes, this is before the floor to approve it. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. Yes, you did call the question, Councillor Cressman. All right, on to report 10.6, and this is the additional capital project justification sheets to be received for information. May I have a mover to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin, and I will turn it back over to Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. As we were going through our capital deliberations on the Saturday, we realized that there was 4 projects that were listed on the summary sheets for which there was no justification detail sheets like these. Of the 4, one of those projects has been withdrawn by staff, and so these are the other 3 sheets: development charges, website update, and asset management plan consulting services. And so we would seek either a blanket motion to approve all 3 or individual motions. I leave it to the chair.
So just to clarify, you're looking for those motions tonight? Then?
I would like to conclude this. These are the last three capital projects for discussion, and so we need a motion to approve or to deny.
So the clerk is suggesting that we'll do them as amendments onto the motion since we have a motion to receive for information on the floor at the moment. Just give me one moment. Alrighty. So, the first one is capital budget request form number 62. And this is from corporate services under finance, its development charges background study under studies and other. It is an estimated capital project cost of $30,000. Any comments or questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, it's funded through development charges, so I move to include.
Agreed. I'll second.
So moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any other comments or questions on this? No? All right, all those in favor? And that carries to be added as an amendment. On to request form number 64. Also corporate services, this is asset management program 2024 update under studies and other, and to be funded through the strategic initiatives reserve funding for $12,000. Any comments or somebody want to make an amendment to some form? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'd actually like to couple item request number 64 and 61. Given that both are funded through strategic initiatives reserves, and that's what their purpose is, I move to include.
Second.
And seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries. So then that leaves us to our now amended motion as amended. Councillor Wilkinson, do you have a question?
Sorry, through the chair,
Yeah, he did.
at the conclusion of this vote, I would want to discuss another item.
Okay. Any other questions or comments then on essentially our amended motion is to include these three budget items? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. Councillor Wilkinson, is this an announcement that you'd like to make? No? Okay, then I will.
This is through the chair. On the advice of our wonderful clerk, I'm looking at something here. I wanted to bring up a potential item for consideration to be included in the capital budget and also determine whether or not it could be included in the capital budget. So I would be asking for council to waive notice and then allow me to bring up a vote to reconsider the very first report we got on the first budget day regarding a speed reduction strategy that Director Mohenhuis had reported on. I'm wondering if we could bring that up and potentially discuss one more time.
So we would need to have 2/3 vote, so we will do that now. There's no discussion for reconsideration. So that has been moved by Councillor Wilkinson. I would need a seconder, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. So this vote is to reopen, to waive notice, so that then Councillor Wilkinson can discuss what he would like to discuss to then be voted on. So all those in favor of waiving notice, that carries unanimously. Councillor Wilkinson, if you want to.
Through the chair, the report to which I'm referring, if everybody wanted to take a minute, it is part of the very first budget meeting. I'm just going to pull up the information here for you. If anybody sees it, we were talking about, maybe it was the second meeting, but it was the speed reduction strategy. It was first meeting? Thank you. So what I'm looking to do is reopen this conversation briefly to see if this is something potentially, I know we were discussing it under the consideration for operating budget. I'm wondering if it could potentially be funded through the capital budget and be added to the levy piece there. Given we were able to make a variety of cuts in other areas, I think this is an important program that we need to potentially pursue long-term. So I wanted to see, one, if Director Molyneux feels it could be funded through the capital budget, or potentially interim director Elliott.
Do you have a page of that, Bill?
Looking for it.
Councillor Wilkinson, just because you might know the answer quicker than the clerk's able to find it, where did we leave with the direction in that first meeting? You're not certain either? All right, we will turn it over to Director Molyneux to answer your questions while the clerk finds that answer for clarity. Director Molyneux, the question was, is it possible to have this moved to capital?
Through you, Chair, I don't know if I can answer the question as to where it should land in the budget, but I would suggest that if the budget was approved, that we could complete the work.
Through the chair, thank you, Director Molyneux. Question to Director Elliott. I believe there's a section on the capital budget that speaks to studies and other items. So that would be one I'm looking at. I know we had, again, discussed this through the purview of operating budget, but could that be considered, because it's a study, as part of the capital budget?
Through you, Madam Chair, this is one of those gray areas, which is it operating or is it capital? As a study, if it's a one-timer, it would be appropriate to be in studies and other, and we could accommodate it within that. I would have to juggle some funds because I've just done that for everything else, but that's not an issue. We could do it if it's the will of council, but arising from the study will be some implementation stages, and I would argue that those are likely operating costs rather than capital, because the speed mitigation, if you're putting in humps, they may not last all that long. It's just an operational thing. So I have no issue with adding this to studies and other, if that's what you wish to do. If I'm not mistaken, I've lost track of what the budget actually is for this.
Through the chair, while we continue to look for where it was brought up, I agree that the outcome of the study would likely lead to operational items. But I think where I'm going with this, the spirit of it is that we complete the work and start the process towards implementing this kind of a strategy, and at least have a roadmap moving forward. And then whether or not we choose to act on the operating pieces of the recommendations, the intention would be that we have that information ready to go, because I think at the end of the day, I still hear from constituents all the time that speeding is a top issue and something that needs to be addressed here. So that would be my thought process through it, is let's knock out the study when we can, and then look at the operational items as they pop up.
Very good. Director Molyneux.
Through you, Chair, it's the January 25th meeting, and it's item 11.2.4.
Thank you very much. And I believe our clerk had just stumbled across it as well.
Stumbled through you, Mayor. It's getting late. Excuse me. Through you, Mayor. What we do have in the minutes here is that council received the report. There was a series of questions asked of the director, particularly around where savings can be found. And there was a motion brought forward that council received the report for information at that time. It was voted on unanimously, but there was no decision in terms of budget. So just to correct the advice that I had provided to you, Councillor Wilkinson, and through you, Mayor, we would not require a vote to reconsider at this point. You could potentially, if you so choose, move any motion you'd like on that matter.
Thank you very much, Clerk, and I did not mean a slight by saying you stumbled upon it. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I believe I overheard a brief question regarding what the budget item would be. So initially it was $150,000 would be the estimated cost to conduct the study. I think we were approaching this initially as including it in the operating budget, which would result in an immediate increase in the levy. However, if we look at it from a capital budget piece, we'd be paying it through studies, which could be added to the portion we're already taking out, which to be determined could be funded at a later point or defer to next year. So I would be looking to include this in our capital budget as part of the studies so that we can start moving forward on traffic calming.
So that motion has been moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Sadoo. Comments or questions on this? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, through you, Chair Salonen. I guess I'm still curious, and I've been looking on the agenda, so I still haven't found it here on the HTML spot, but what would be the benefit? So if we do move it from operating to capital, are you saying that it then reduces the tax increase in terms of the...
If I may, sorry, through the chair. So this was something we just received for information. It was an item that I had brought forward to be considered, but I think we looked at it and said the cost would result in a levy increase because it'd be part of the operating budget at the time. What I'm suggesting is that we move it to the capital budget, where essentially we could take, I suppose we would have to, and I'm looking at Director Elliott here, but borrow to help fund it. But given the substantial areas we were able to make cuts in the capital budget, I'm asking that we consider to include this. As for the benefits, I think we would have to go back to potentially Director Mullen, he's here, could summarize briefly what it is.
Yeah, through you, Chair Salonen. No, I'm not asking for the benefit of the program. I'm asking for the benefit of moving it from operating to capital.
So through the chair, my understanding is we never actually included it in the operating budget at all. So right now, it's not an item that's funded. So I'm asking that we move it to capital so that it could receive funding.
Director Mullen.
Through you, Chair, and if I might add to that, this is a one-time ask for the study, but Council should expect that there will be additional costs associated with this on an annual basis, and they will not be in the small order, I would suggest. They will be probably within the range of what the study itself will cost, and you should expect to be investing in that annually.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, conducting the study wouldn't necessarily compel us to complete these items, would it? Or would they be available for consideration like our operating budget is annually?
Through you, Chair, so this would give you a framework, and it would give a limited detailed review of some of our priority locations. When it comes to traffic calming, I would suggest there's a threshold of items that will come back to Council for approval and for inclusion in the budget, and that might be on an annual basis or it may be on a location-specific basis.
Just for anybody following along, if you're trying to find this, this is from January 25th. It's item 11.2.4 if you were trying to find the report, whether for Council or those following along. Councillor Cressman.
So as I look at this and I hear through you, Mayor, I hear the response. One side of me says this definitely is a operating, because it doesn't have, you'd be borrowing money, paying it back at minimum over 5 years, and it's a study that's one and done. But then there's an annual component that you have to put into operating to address the outcomes of the report. So I just can't see it fitting into capital. It just doesn't fit my box of capital, and my accountant's training me for how many 40 plus years and what you include in capital and what you include in operating. And I realize each one has a little different lens, but I see this as an operating item as compared to, I know what, I sympathize with Councillor Wilkinson and what he's trying to do and the optics of not adding 1.5 to the tax increase. I'd like to defer, maybe. I don't know what I'd like to do.
Okay, is that an actual motion to defer? Because if so, that has to be addressed now under Robert's rules.
I'm hesitating to enter it. I'll let other people discuss, and then I might.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, perhaps more clarity. I just want to be very clear here. I think the idea is that the study is capital in nature because it will produce recommendations and options that could come out of it, and potentially, Director Mullen, if you could just confirm. So if a study is conducted, it provides us with the framework and the ability to start this if we so choose, but it doesn't necessarily say that we must have operating costs that come out of it. It just gives us options in order for us to consider that down the road. Is that accurate?
Through you, Chair, yeah, it more or less will give you a sort of an operating toolbox so that we can evaluate some of the locations. As I mentioned, it will include a limited review of some locations, but there are a number of requests for traffic calming, and those will require reviews at some point. They can't all be reviewed at once. That's not a cost-effective approach, so we do have to prioritize, and I think that's what you'd be seeing coming out of the policy in the toolbox, so it gives us some idea of what to expect moving forward. But again, we will have to do some form of reporting back to council, at least on an annual basis, for some of these locations as they do get reviewed.
Through the chair, so is this something that we, as you're suggesting, we do already? I mean, we get requests for speed reduction in other areas, so this is something that makes up part of your operating budget as is?
Through you, Chair, no, I wouldn't suggest it's part of our operating budget as is. This is, if we have a speed reduction request, what we do now is we track requests that come in, and we've recently started doing that in the last 3 or 4 years. So we have a list of locations that need to be reviewed, but we don't have additional budget for these types of items, and we have not budgeted for these types of items within our current budget.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. When you say that you get a number that need to be reviewed and you've got a list, how do you review them?
Through you, Chair, what occurs currently is that they sit on the list and they wait for staff availability. As council knows, we've been short-staffed the last couple of years with some of our resources, and specifically in this area. So the list has been waiting for staffing resources, but it also, to some degree, we should expect that there's specialized consultant resources that are needed for some of the requests that come in, because they are neighborhood level traffic issues, and we do not have the expertise or the capacity to deal with those types of issues in-house.
Yep,
Sorry, you said you don't have the staff. I still kind of want to know, what is it that they do? If you did have the staff and you had this list, what would they do?
Through you, Chair, so they would take what we consider minor level traffic calming request review. So they would go out and they would collect data. They would review the specific location and identify what the concerns are. And then we would have the data compiled and looked at versus what the complaints are. And so then from a minor level, so if it's just a speeding concern, for example, then staff may be able to verify that yes, there is a speeding concern in the area. That's something that we need data to confirm. So our staff would be able to do that. But if it was something like, for example, the request on Livingston Boulevard to have speed bumps put in, and I believe there was reference to one specific leg, that's a neighborhood level traffic issue that if we were to just place one calming feature or one speed mitigation feature in one location, we can expect that that's going to create problems in other areas of the neighborhood. And so our staff would not be capable to undertake that work based on the scale of a project like that, but also the expertise in terms of traffic consulting that would be needed to make a recommendation to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Cressman.
Again, I don't have the report sitting in front of me, but I think you estimated $150,000 for this study, and I guess in terms of order of magnitude, what does $100,000 get us? What is 100? I'm not breaking it down that granular, but how did you arrive at the 150? I'm not doubting your figures. I'm just kind of saying, did we buy a Did we buy a Volkswagen, a Chevy, or a Cadillac?
Through you, Chair. So we asked a couple of traffic consultants to give us a preliminary budget for part of what is presented. And then if you look at the report, there is a breakdown of specific funding required to do the work. So in part, we have the traffic data collection tools, so we'd be requesting that those budget for those items so that we could purchase what is referred to as a black cat unit. So those are units that get posted on hydropoles or any other sort of vertical feature in the right-of-way, and then we can collect the appropriate speed data. We do have radar speed display signs, however, those are not, and they give us some form of data, but it's not accurate data that we need to make recommendations as part of a traffic calming program. So that's part of what is presented here for budget. We have $35,000 for that. We have a regional traffic calming program that we are part of as part of the Traffic Coordinators Committee. And so we're asking for budget associated with a regional study that's going on specific to settlement areas. The region's undertaking the study for settlement areas to reduce speeds on regional roads and to do speed mitigation on regional roads. And so we can expect there's going to be an impact as a result on township roads. So that's a contribution towards that study. And that piece is for $25,000. And then we have a study in full as far as the policy, a toolbox, and a review of existing rights-of-way, which is a limited review. And so we have budget of $15,000 for the policy, $25,000 for the toolbox, and $50,000 for the review of existing rights-of-way.
Just a question of clarification on the $25,000 for the regional review. Why are we paying for that when it's on their roads?
Through you, Chair, we're contributing as a partner as a result of what we expect will be impacts on our roads. So we're trying to assess what is included, what will sort of impact as a result of any traffic calming or speed mitigation issues as a result of the regional study. So if they undertake, if they've undertaken installation on a regional road, there will be impacts on township road. And so there is, it's not just the Township of Wilmot, there are also other lower tiers of the table as well, but we contribute because it will have an impact on our road network as well.
When you're saying impact, you're saying a positive impact on our local roads or a negative because they're avoiding regional roads?
Through you, Mayor, I can't, I would say my expectation is it will have a negative impact on local roads. We see that quite frequently. And almost in the same vein of talking about Livingston Boulevard, you know, you have high volume, higher speed roads, and if we're putting things in place to slow people down, there's very much an expectation that people will start to use other roads to get to where they want to go.
Does the region like to give out money for where we might have impacts on their roads? I won't make you answer that. Councillor Cressman.
So I'm intrigued by this study. I think it has to be done at some point in time, but I would like the background of where we sit on our tax increase. I sympathize with Councillor Wilkinson that it potentially should be in capital, but I can't see it falling definitively in that box. So as such, I would say that I would like to defer the final decision till such time as we have the numbers put together for where, with our pluses and minuses, where we sit at the current tax rate, and then I'll be prepared and better informed to determine where I can live. If I have to put it in capital, then I will. So a motion to defer.
Does that clarify to March 4th meeting then? Yes. For budget day? Yeah. Okay. So that motion to defer has been put forward. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Councillor Wilkinson, do you have a comment on it?
Through the chair, given that we have other items sort of compiling the data for what will make up the, in essence, this connection to a lot of things, but we have a deferred item right now regarding funding the levy funded debt or the levy funded debt in this budget or next. coming on March 4th, I believe. Could this be included as part of that report as sort of, I guess, could it be tiered in options and say, if you choose to include this, these would be the options?
Through you, Madam Chair, as staff, we'll put together a report that will address both issues together so that it's summarized and you can see the impacts of one or both, or one or the other or both. And then the draft budget will be standing on its own, subject to amendment by that first report.
Very good. So that's been moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions on it? Seeing none, all those in favor of deferral? All those opposed? And that carries. On to announcements. Oh, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, through you, Chair Salin. I got confused. I thought Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Sadhu put forward a motion, and then we didn't actually.
Because Councillor Cressman put forward a motion to defer, and so that has to be dealt with immediately, and because it passed, the deferral passed, the motion will be brought back on March the 4th.
That just removes that other motion.
Yes, because it was their motion that got deferred. Yeah. Okay, on to announcements. I do have one announcement. If you've noticed the lovely matching outfits, I mean, I have suggested to council that we have matching uniforms going forward, but they are celebrating Black History Month or Black Excellence Month, which is what we are all wearing them for. And on that note, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who came out in the community, to our guest speaker that we had at Tuesday in joint with the Township of Wellesley and Waterloo Oxford District Secondary School, as well as a shout out to Donna Kell, Sharon Chambers, and Jeff Bunn, who all helped in facilitating and organizing that and attended as well. Very much appreciate that. It was a really great talk, and I believe that if it's not already posted, that there is a recording that will be posted. It will be posted is what I can get. Oh, very good. It will be posted soon if you do want to go back and look at that and learn a bit about the event that we had. Are there any other announcements that staff have at this time? Councillor Cressman?
Are you going to remind us about Heritage Day on Saturday?
Thank you, Councillor Cressman. Through you, Chair Salonen. The Heritage Day is this Saturday at the New Dundee Community Centre in Councillor Cressman's ward, of course. And that's from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. New Dundee Community Centre, Heritage Day this Saturday.
And it's a free event, so we hope to see you all there.
But there is food there. New Dundee, what is the New Dundee Women's Institute? They have food that you can purchase. So there will be food.
Very good. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, just an announcement. Tuesday night, I had the privilege of presenting a check for $2,000, $1,500 with what came from the door prize at Roma. And there was over $4,000 for the Waterloo Region Food Bank raised that night, so and over 1,000 pounds of food collected, and so it leveraged. I forget how. What is it? One pound. Anyhow, $1. I forget what the ratio is. There was an excellent article about the Wilmot Resource Center in the Record today. And I almost wanted to reach out and hug the lady because of her long-term support there. But the other, there will be a check for $2,000 that will be going to the Wilmot Family Resource Center that supports Wilmot and Southern Wellesley Township.
Very good, and thank you again for keeping us apprised on that, Councillor Cressman, and for choosing to make your donations local. It's especially after that article, we know that it really does have impacts to our neighbors and friends and family in our community. Any last announcements? Seeing none, I just need a motion to adjourn. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Have a great evening.